Hello, friends! How is everyone today? We're here with Cheeseness. How are you doing?
I'm doing well.
Excellent! So, my mods have prepared a list of GameDev memes, and that's going to be the plan for today. So, we have a whole bunch of game design and game dev memes for different engines, different concepts, but I think the common thread of these honestly apply to anybody artistic, anybody who's been involved in project management. I think there's some good general memes for everybody here. How are you doing today?
A buffet of game development reflections for everybody to enjoy.
Exactly, just so much content, so much. Yes. Shall we start right in?
Moving on.
All right. Let's see. My buggy and unfinished project. Me abandoning it for an idea that I had on the toilet. How do you manage to keep focused on a project? Because this is just so true, right? Like, this happens all the time.
I feel like I don't suffer from this a lot.
Really?
But that's a very subjective opinion, and I'm sure that other people who pay attention to my work probably feel very differently about that. So, for example, I always feel like I'm constantly triaging and constantly weighing up what is the most effective thing to do. And there are ideas that I'm definitely excited about and motivated by that I don't immediately jump on. And I kind of have a list of things I'd like to make before I die.
Gotcha.
And I put stuff on that list, and I think when it got to be around 200, I was like, that's more than I will get to do. Maybe I should approach this differently. And so now I don't put anything on the list unless it stays in my head for 2 weeks. So it has to stick with me for long enough for that.
I like that idea.
Right? It's like a filter. It says if I'm not excited enough about it to like remember it without any tools, then it's probably not exciting enough to pursue. And I think having that gap means that I'm less likely to just get up in the morning and start working on something new. That said, last month I got up in the morning and worked on a game jam that I wasn't planning to participate on halfway through the jam.
Fun.
Earlier in the year, I just one day decided that I was going to make Minesweeper, but with dinosaur bones instead of bombs.
I like that. Positive reinforcement Minesweeper. That's actually a really good idea.
Right. I was watching someone stream Minesweeper, and I was like, you know what? I enjoy playing Minesweeper, but explosives are boring, and dying as a consequence is boring. What is interesting? What is exciting? Dinosaurs, done. A month later, I had a playable prototype that covered most of the gameplay bases that I wanted to explore.
That sounds awesome. I'll have to check that out. Is that on your itch page? Which is definitely... Which just happens to be linked in the description of this video.
Thank you. It's called Bonesweeper, and I'm hoping to maybe get some funding to develop that into something larger.
Nice. I look forward to that. No, that sounds great. So your plan is that you finish your projects first, unless they really stick, or unless they sound really awesome, in which case, follow your dreams.
Well, I think it's one of those things where if you have a baseline, then you can make a decision. If you don't have any like reference points, then it's a lot harder to be thoughtful about stuff. And so when I do decide to make something, just on a whim or off the bat, I'm making the conscious decision to prioritize that above all of the other things that I have, rather than just, constantly letting new things distract me.
So just latching in and saying, I'm in this for the long haul, because this project is interesting enough to be worth it, sort of thing. In a way.
Yeah. And that said, like, there's a game that I've been working on for about 6 years that I love and am attached to and still intend to finish, but it has been interrupted by a vast number of projects.
Reasonable. Onwards?
Onwards.
All right. We have here Laughs in Indie Dev. Producer, director, actor, editor, writer. What is that? What does that say? Creatives. Sales and marketing. Oh no, sales and marketing.
Right. Yeah, it's very true.
You have to wear many hats. You must wear every hat sometimes.
Yeah, I was talking about this the other day, and I have no idea what I said, so I can't offer any kind of interesting anecdotes.
Well, like, it's one of those things where you need to be like an expert is going to be better than a generalist, but you need to be a generalist at everything to understand how to get along without a corporate backing, right? Like if you don't have
Mm.
the backing of, a $1 million team or multi-million dollar team rather.
Or like if you're a solo dev, there are. I think you still need to do a lot of team management, and I think that that's something that a lot of people go into it not being very conscious of. The fact that you need to manage your own morale, and you need to
Yeah.
focus on how the different disciplines that you're engaging with, how the output from that interacts with each other, and how you coordinate those things. So I think you still need to do a lot of that kind of administrative stuff. It's just it all happens internally and mentally, and that's something that takes a bit of practice to master. And it's also like you never have like the motivational. You never get re-energized by seeing other people's work. You never
Right.
have other people lifting you up when you feel down. You never get to see something shift and into something that was new or different or unexpected because you've been involved with it every step of the way.
Although sometimes
And
things can pivot into something that you didn't expect, while you're working on it. That can also happen,
oh,
right?
for sure. But you never kind of go to sleep giving someone some sprites and wake up in the morning and see that animated in ways that it wasn't yesterday. Like that never happens
Yeah,
without you doing every step along the way.
I gotcha. I love that chat's screaming at the concept of marketing because I mean that's a big mood.
Yeah. Yeah,
Onwards.
it's tough. Onwards.
All right.
Well, the
What do
other
we have
thing
here?
about solo
Oh,
stuff is if you get sick, no one else is going to pick up the slack. If you
yeah.
lose motivation, no one else is going to pick up the slack. And like that's another thing that you got to be very conscious of and manage. And
You
when
have to
you're
account
across
for.
so many disciplines, it's like, yeah, if you're not feeling the artistic motivation, you're eventually going to have to address that. Yeah, it's tough.
That was always a limitation of mine is that I am not an artist and I've accepted that. Like, can I do some art? Sure, but not in a professional level. So there's always this, concept that I need to accept and understand my own limitations and say, well, if I'm not an artist, and I'm not, that's okay if I can find somebody else who is an artist to fill in the gaps of where I know my weaknesses are.
And I
And
feel like there's also value in, or also spaces where you can kind of go, well, this is my set of constraints. This is where my skills lie. What can I do that fits within those constraints, and how can I best utilize those skills that I have in an interesting way? But yeah, it's always fun when you can bring someone else on who can, bring something to the table that goes beyond what you could do.
Yeah. So we have developers at the beginning of a project, developers at the end of a project, and then developers at the GDC postmortem.
It's funny how we have all these success-driven narratives.
Yeah. There is always that danger of listening to a success story of someone who is, I'm not going to say lucky because these things take a lot of skill, but from somebody who was successful, but their path to success may not be mimicable, may not be something that can apply to you. Yeah, may not be reproducible, exactly.
Yeah, it's tough, and there's so much. I like to think that we all put hard work in, we all put a lot of effort in, we all rely on a lot of skills, but I think a lot of it boils down to how good we are at mitigating potential disasters and how good we are at responding to unforeseen opportunities more than anything that we've kind of any opportunities that we've crafted out of whole cloth, as it were.
Yeah, how well you can adapt on the fly. And then in the GDC postmortem, it's, well, no, we were under control and we understood that in the long run.
It's a natural human thing. Like we want to recognize patterns and we want to understand systems as we go. We want to, that's very natural for us to want to try and interpret and identify things into narratives that we can give to other people that help explain and help other people understand the journey that we've gone through. In this industry in particular, though, we do end up framing a lot of personal experience as broadly applicable advice.
Yeah. Onwards?
Onwards.
Onwards. Imagine paying for your game engine. This post made by Godot Gang.
This is like tools in general. There's many schools of thought, but I remember I've pretty much been using free software as my primary productivity tools since 2002, maybe. And these days, I'm usually excited by seeing proprietary or paid software. I see things with cool features, and as far as I'm aware, I was the first developer to make a VR game in Unity on Linux. But I never ended up releasing that, and I was always planning to shift that over to some other open source tech in the long run, because that's the end game that I want to end up with, and it makes it really hard for me to embrace using non-free stuff. But that said, I do donate money to the Godot project, and I do want to give some financial support to the free software projects I do use. So it's
absolutely, yeah. If you're getting something for free, then you should be willing to pay what it's worth to you over time, right? Like, yeah.
And that's what led me away from Windows and away from Photoshop and stuff. Was like I kind of felt if a thing wasn't worth paying for, it's probably not worth using, and I'd rather give my attention to other things that maybe would benefit more from having my attention than something that I'm not willing to support,
And it also sort of holds the promise of a better world, right? It sort of has a better things are possible mood to it in a way, like,
Yeah, definitely.
If free software can survive and thrive, then we live in a world where that's possible. If we live in a world where that's possible, that's, adds a bit of hope to it adds a bit of hope to your day.
It's really nice as well that the metrics for measuring the success of a free software project don't have anything to do with its commercial viability in any meaningful sense, and don't really have anything to do with like user base size or anything like that. Like the traditional metrics that we use for saying this is a successful thing just aren't relevant, because in 100 years the license that allows people to share and redistribute and build on top of existing free software applications means that those projects, even if people have stopped working on it in the meantime, those projects will always still exist, providing data loss doesn't destroy them in the meantime. Whereas in 100 years, the corporations that own and control some other random arbitrary piece of proprietary software may have been acquired by people who have different attitudes and different philosophies that just discontinue a thing and then it doesn't exist anymore.
Or is not backwards compatible, which is also a similar concern. Definitely. Although what surprises me is how few resources for streaming are paid. Like, that actually surprised me. Is like across peer live and OBS and all the software I use. Like, I have a pretty penny worth of hardware in front of me, but that's that's physical devices. But software wise, most of what I have is free.
Yeah, it's interesting because before OBS, like was it XSplit and
XSplit
and other stuff was like had free versions but were proprietary,
demonstrably worse.
Yeah. And now OBS, and then I think it's something that you can kind of see in other spaces as well. Like, not necessarily just free software stuff, but you think about itch as a game publishing or game distribution platform is generally run as a passion project by people who are it is a company and they do have employees and they do pay people. But I think that a lot of what makes it what it is not people chasing profitability or corporate interests. Right. It's people chasing things because they're passionate about them.
Yeah.
And if you're making tools, and this is something that kind of resonates within the free software movement, is that if you're making a tool for yourself and you have made it, then you have kind of given yourself all of the value that you need to get out of it. And it doesn't really cost you anything to let other people use it, If your primary business model isn't making software, if your primary business model is doing the thing that the software empowers you to do, then releasing the stuff that you've made as free software makes it really, is something that's really accessible. And that's why, like, Blender was built originally as an internal tool for a VFX production place, and that's what it was doing. And they Ton Rosendahl decided to try and reacquire it after his company was sold and managed to get the rights. He was like, well, let's just open it up and let anyone use it. And the impact that that's had on the world and people's creative freedom and ability
the number
to
of people
contribute
who
to
are
culture
allowed,
is so huge.
the number of people who are allowed to exist in that space is just exponentially larger than it could have been otherwise.
And that enriches culture, I think. Like, that's a culturally valuable thing.
Mm-hmm. Onwards?
Onwards.
All right. Working in my game? No. Leaving Unity open in the background and pretend I'm working? Yep.
This is interesting. Like everybody works differently, right?
Yeah.
I have, I'm not intending to posture or boast, but I have 3 monitors on my desk, and I have a 4th that I can plug in if I need to do things in other spaces away from my desk. And I'm like, whenever I use my computer, I'm multitasking. I'm always doing stuff.
You got it, right?
So yeah. I mean, I know people who can't do that. They're like, I got to close everything else and I got to focus, otherwise I'm not going to get anything done. And I think that's kind of what this is referring to. But I find that unless I can glance across and on my rightmost monitor is my email and a lot of my chat clients and stuff. I keep my main productivity space is usually the middle monitor, and then I keep a bunch of other sort of more entertainment-y type things happening on the left monitor, and I keep all those going at once. So my ex used to very much dislike it, but sometimes I'd have like 2 streams on at once because I can more or less parse that amount of information at once without getting too overloaded. And so yeah, I find I do the opposite. I'll bring up a game because I like to, I play games as well. And I'll have a game there, and I'll something like let's say Into the Breach, right? I'll play a few turns, and then I'll get some work done, and play a few more turns, get some work done. I remember when Civilization Beyond Earth first came out, it had the thing where it mutes on loss of focus and pauses on loss of focus. And so during the other player's turn, I would switch over and do some work. But because the game paused, the other turn never finished. And so the window would find its way into the background, and I found that I had like a copy of the game running for 2 days without remembering that it was still going, and I found that deeply frustrating.
Hot take: Beyond Earth is my favorite Civ game, and is criminally underrated.
Yeah, I'm really sad that people don't like Beyond Earth.
I know why.
It's perfect.
I know why people don't like it. People wanted Alpha Centauri 2, and Beyond Earth is its own game, but it's not Alpha Centauri 2.
Okay, so like I need to remember my timelines. When did Pandora First Contact come out?
I don't know offhand.
Because I want to say that predated Beyond Earth, and people criticized it heavily for just being a retread of Alpha Centauri. And then Beyond Earth comes out, and people are like, this isn't just Alpha Centauri. And I'm like, well, make up your mind. What do you want?
True.
Yeah, the thing that bugs me the most about Beyond Earth is that in the marketing for the game, they spoiled all things. And the whatever the Civilopedia equivalent is, spoils the endings. I was like, that was the thing for me. Maybe I just missed it in Alpha Centauri, but I really liked not knowing how it ended. I didn't know where things were going, and it was a surprise when I had a transcendence or something else happened.
Yeah, and it was interesting to the slow realization that no matter which path you take, you're playing the villain of a sci-fi novel.
Maybe. I primarily played as Gaia, which I feel like it's probably the least, or the most one. Well, obviously it's the one that's most in harmony with the planet and the ecosystem.
Yeah, but it's also removing all free will. I mean, we can discuss this later. We should have a. You know what?
Yeah.
Let's play that sometime on stream. Let's stream Beyond Earth sometime.
Yeah, it'd be fun. But yeah, Beyond Earth, there's like little pop-ups that are going, do you want to go for this victory condition? I'm like, no, I don't want to know that it even exists. Leave me
Mhm.
alone.
Oh, and to answer Wolf in the chat, I will be playing more Jackbox in the future. I don't know when. My collab schedule is strange and weird.
Do you find that you leave stuff open in the background while you and kind of forget about it? Is that something that you struggle with?
So I have another computer and also a laptop. So for me, when I am doing work stuff or programming stuff, I'm at a computer where my mind space has to be. I'm doing these things, and I intentionally don't put games on that system. That's that if I'm sitting in front of that computer, in front of that monitor, I'm working. Yeah, whereas over here, I'm either playing or streaming, which I have to be in the play mentality. Otherwise, it's not going to be an interesting stream, So that's how I separate it. Like if I start working on something on playing on something, it's difficult for me to get back on track.
I think it's a good example of how different people have different work styles, and it's important to find and lean into what works for you, what allows you to. I don't want to say like you don't want to singularly focus on maximizing your productivity, because that can lead to like burnout and overwork and stuff.
Very easily.
But finding a way that you can be comfortable with the right balance of productivity, I think that's really healthy.
Onwards.
Me
making games? I have attained the powers and knowledge of the gods. I have built an entire digital universe and can shape it, every piece of it to my liking down to the smallest atom. Also me making games. I make the player jump the way I want.
This is art in general, right? Like,
yeah, for sure.
I did a drawing of a beluga once, and I think it's one of the best sketches I've ever done. I'm really happy with it. I love it. And the same day, I went to draw another beluga, and it is possibly the worst drawing I've ever done. It was so bad I couldn't finish it. I was just like, no, this isn't going anywhere, and just left it. The contrast
it's weird with streaming too.
Sorry.
I just want to say it's weird with streaming too, because in the context of the same game, I might have a good stream and then a bad stream, and it's like someone who's watching this all in a row is going to be like, that might even stand out, but maybe not. Maybe I'm overthinking it, or maybe I'm underthinking it. Who knows? Maybe we should think about it more.
I think it's one of those things where you've got to prime the pipes a bit. Like there's always going to be some garbage that's coming out, and you've got to give that space and room to clear before the good stuff can pass through. And I think it's excuse me. I think it's healthy to maintain a positive relationship with your less good work. And embrace that and love it. If you're constantly angsty about it, that's probably not a healthy relationship with your work.
Yeah, I also want to say that this adds an interesting layer of the difference between being very good at programming and being good at conveyance and the design aspect, because those are two different skill sets. Like you can
definitely
be an incredible scripter and still not have still make a game that's difficult to play, that's could is not good because it doesn't convey what you want it to, or it maybe in worst case scenario it's conveying the opposite.
I think I recently released a game that I want to rework the tutorial a little bit for, because I'm finding that there are some players who miss a very key mechanic, which I had intended to be discoverable on its own and still kind of referenced in the tutorial, but I come away with people who I have witnessed a portion of the player base who just doesn't latch onto that and then thinks that the game is something entirely different from what it is.
I remember watching a GDC about a retrospective of Lego Star Wars, and one of the devs watching streamers get completely lost and being like, oh my gosh, did I do poor job of conveyance? Did I not, lay this out? Is there this problem? And it's like, maybe, but when you're streaming, you're also, doing 6 different other things, watching chat, responding to them, watching stream health, and it can be harder to, it can be easier to miss things. So
you're only given a fraction of your attention to the game.
Yeah,
and I think there's also a thing of, like, it's easy to respond to data prematurely. Like, you can get feedback and you can jump on it immediately, but maybe that feedback doesn't represent the entirety of your audience, or maybe maybe that feedback doesn't tell you that player's whole the whole picture and the whole experience. It's always tricky to weigh up and understand.
I actually have a tangential story about that regarding tabletop gaming, and the story kind of tells itself. It's in the idea that balance changes are made based off of two sources. One, tournament data, because that's where they actually receive all the information in win-loss records and ratios and lists. And two, anecdotal data from forums, from the people who are yelling, whining the loudest. When you don't actually have proper metrics to work with, it can be hard to figure out what to work with.
Yeah, the signal to noise ratio can be very bad. But I think like broadly, not just in games, there's a lot of contemporary society is, or there are a lot of people invested in pushing the value of data analytics, and I think there's a lot of pressure to give premature value to data before it's had a chance to demonstrate its worth.
You see that in movies a lot too. Someone makes a bad movie and people say, "Oh wow, people just must not like this genre anymore," instead of actually,
right? Yeah, genre's dead now.
I've seen that. Onwards.
Yeah, it's interesting. Onwards.
When you ship your first indie game on Steam and someone buys it, customer.
Yeah, I cried a bit when Hive Time sold its first copies.
Aw,
actually
that's
I
fair.
still cry a little bit when people buy Hive Time today.
You mean Hive Time that's available on the link in the description from
It's Hive Time available now. Yeah, I had someone who paid $300 for it, and I had to send them an email and say, "Hello, was this a typo? I don't want to update my stats. If there's something went wrong, we can work it out. No big deal. But I would like to double check and make sure that you're not out of pocket for that amount." And they went, "No, it's a difficult time, and I want to make sure that I'm supporting people." And
nice.
I'm intentionally making this gesture, and I sat down and had a little cry.
Speaking of okay, never mind. Onwards.
Onwards. But it is moving when someone.
Oh yeah.
Connects with your work.
The joke was I was moving my Ko-fi link when I was saying that.
Oh right, sorry.
that was the joke. It wasn't that funny. But no. You also have a new game that just came out, right?
Chat. I just released a game called Bat Egg. Which is somewhere between like Flappy Bird and a platformer. Sort of.
Interesting.
Your focus is managing, so it's more. I hadn't really, I guess, prepared myself to talk about. I probably should have. That would have been sensible. That would be we mentioned marketing before. Obviously, that's my point as well. But yeah, so if you think of Flappy Bird and you go, okay, what if Flappy Bird was better? No, I know what that's mean. I've never played Flappy Bird, and so I don't have any kind of real first-hand impressions. This is more, what does the idea of that sort of game inspire in me? So I was like, okay, what things could be interesting? So you have control over your lateral movement, and you also have stamina to manage. So instead of just being about pressing the button at the right time, you now actually have agency and move around the space. It is linear, but you still kind of explore around a little bit. And yeah, it does kind of give you multiple paths and multiple options for choosing how you navigate the obstacles in your way.
Is it procedural or?
Yeah, entirely generated, except for the tutorial. The tutorial's authored. Sorry.
Nice.
I wanted to make something that created spaces that I wouldn't expect, because that's how I refine the core gameplay. That's the only way that I can refine the core gameplay. If the core gameplay is about responding to unexpected things that come towards you, then I can't make levels that will surprise me. But that said, if the game picks up an audience, I do have an idea for a second story. So in addition to being endless, it has 2 endless modes, but it also has a story mode that has a finite end.
That's cool.
If it picks up an audience, I have ideas for a second story that I would be willing to tell with the game that would use authored levels.
Nice. That
So
sounds
best of
sounds
both
exciting.
worlds, hopefully.
Yeah. Let's see. Fixing a bug. Okay. Fixing a bug with level design. That's I like that. It's like, okay, do we know the script? No, but we can make it so that the bug's not a problem. Scrapping the feature. Change the engine.
Yeah, so this is all about avoiding doing the work, right? You're like, if someone else can fix the bug with level design, if they can just work around it with the level design and I don't have to think about it, that's a better solution. If we just get rid of it, then I don't have to fix it.
Then it's someone else's problem, and then I don't have to worry about it.
Yep.
Oh, gosh.
This is a trap, right? Like, everybody falls into this idea of maybe the grass is greener on the other side of the fence. Maybe if I just start from a blank slate or clear away all of the things that are in my way right now, then there won't be any more obstacles in the future. It'll be wonderful.
Hey, remember Duke Nukem Forever?
How it works. Yeah.
Remember where they went down this line like 4 times?
Yep.
That's what I think when I hear change the engine, because it's like, oh no, bad.
Whenever I see people doing that, it feels to me, and I don't mean this in a mean-spirited way, but it feels like it's a mark of inexperience. Because a lot of what, at least in my mind, a lot of what defines being a creative person and finishing creative works is embracing the limitations and constraints that you find yourself with. And sometimes that's bugs. Sometimes that's engine bugs that you can't fix, and feeling like you need to wait for the next version of a thing so it will have a big flashy shiny feature.
Innovate through it.
Yeah, like I see a lot of people, particularly in the Godot community, who are always focused on whatever is the next big version because it will have some important feature, and regardless of what time slice you look at, there's always a new big feature on the horizon. And the difference between people who make stuff and people who don't is the people who do make stuff
and they're waiting for Godot.
Yeah. yes, the lovely name pun there.
Okay.
But it's like, I've been making games in some form or another for about 30 years, and if I, if in the 80s I was like, well, I'm not gonna make stuff because, I don't have access to 3D graphics, or I don't have access to, or the skills or abilities to do 3D graphics, or I don't have the tools to do 3D graphics,
or the dev kits in that era. The dev kits were extremely difficult to acquire in North America.
Yeah. Well, I just had an Amiga, which I could make my own games on.
Fair enough.
And so in that respect, and at the time, I only made games for myself and for my family and friends and stuff. But yeah, if I didn't just make things, then I wouldn't be where I am today.
Yeah. Onwards. This is in the same vein as the other one. Indie dev, I'm going to start another project. Because you finished your current project, right? You've finished your current project, right?
It is hard because, like, there are points at which it is the right decision to do, to, like, either put a project on hold or say this project isn't working and it doesn't make sense for me to sink myself over this one thing. But I think that's something that you can only navigate with experience again. Is this something that you've had to tackle much?
Oh yeah, no. I'm quite literally a streamer because of a separate abandoned project that I picked this thing up halfway through. Someday maybe I'll get back to the other project, but I'm having fun doing this, so probably not. It's really just it's a value judgment of deciding what you feel is more important or what you feel is more time effective. Like a long, multiple year project might just not be right for you if you have an idea that can be done in a couple of weeks and be worthwhile.
Yeah, definitely. And then, like, there are plenty of other opportunities and options and things. Like I mentioned the project that I've been working on for about 6 years. I stopped that for a year so that I could work on Day of the Tentacle Remastered, and that was the right thing to do for my career. I think it was the right thing to do for for Day the Tentacle, for sure. Like, I feel like I
Yeah.
brought something of value to that project. It was
Mm-hmm.
the right thing for me personally because it's a game that I already loved and got a lot of value out of having a new connection to that game. And in the long run, I think that increased my visibility in a way that will make that other project have a
Better
larger
when it's time.
audience when
Yeah.
when it's time for it. I would like to work on it now, but I know that it's a project that's not going to make any money, and
Fair. No,
and
that's the other
and
concern.
I'm in a slightly tight position right now, and
Yeah, and
I can't
that's
prioritize it.
actually the other project I was working on was tabletop, and well, the tabletop industry, if that sure happened.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah,
Onwards. Sorry,
the
say.
the people who made the Hand of Fate, because the Hand of Fate is another game that I
Mm.
put Winter's Wake on hold to work on. The company that made Hand of Fate has also gone out of business, and that's very sad. The
Oh,
company that made the Hand of Fate board game went out of business as well.
oh, who was that?
That was Rule and Make.
Okay, I'm not familiar with them.
We had a crowdfunding campaign for the board game, and that went pretty well, I think.
Okay,
I think we had a crowdfunding campaign. Oh goodness, it's been so long. I'm like
fair enough.
99% sure we had a crowdfunding campaign, and that raised more. I think it raised more than the money that they were asking for, and people who played the game seemed to feel like it was good. And as far as I'm aware, like it was positively received. And it's kind of like, you know, if those are your metrics for success, then that doesn't lead to sustainability.
Yeah. When you open a ticket, assign it to yourself, fix the issue, and close it.
That's me. I'm the MVP.
I did it. Although if you're working
This is
for
my entire life as a solo dev, you know.
well, yeah. In a larger company, though, you might need to do this to prove that you've been working on stuff. Like there's that question of how much time do I have to spend to push through bureaucracy, almost like bureaucracy in a sense. Like how much time do I need to spend to show that yes, I am doing stuff. If all you have is a single Git push that says that I did a thing, it's like okay, I'm opening a ticket, I'm assigning it, I'm fixing it, I'm closing it, I'm showing you guys how much I'm working on, so you can see and validate, verify. This seems more of a corporate thing than the indie side, but
yeah, I think it's really important to view ticketing systems as a communication medium.
yeah.
And like particularly if we think about that context where you're in a large team and you've got like dedicated support personnel, they're going to look at the ticketing system. They're not going to look at the repo commits. So if they've been interacting with users and users are reporting a bug, if it's in the ticketing system and marked as resolved, then the support people can identify that. If it's just marked as resolved in the commit log, then they're probably not going to find that, and then they're going to make it a new ticket and potentially waste a bunch of people's time.
Yep.
So I think there is some
depending on the size of the
potential.
company, there's a 50-50 chance that the person handling the tickets doesn't know Git. Like
Yeah.
like just
Which is
some
like,
people can be so separated.
It's good for people to have multiple skills across lots of disciplines and awareness at least across lots of disciplines. But
Yeah.
it does make sense to compartmentalize that sometimes.
Onwards.
Onwards.
You said RNG is fun and exciting when you get loot. The lie detector test determined that was a lie.
People have a really interesting relationship, or the player community, player culture. Let's say player culture has an interesting relationship with the perception of RNG.
Definitely.
And I think it's like the same as engine narratives, where there are people who go, oh, you can't, Unity is only for bad games, and game developers, or what have you. There are lots of people who make judgment calls on the output of the tools that don't necessarily reflect or have anything to do at all with the identity of the tools themselves.
Or rather, in the vein of listening to feedback, Sirlin, I don't know how your opinion on him, but he had a fantastic speech podcast about cocaine logic. Are you familiar with that?
No, I'm not.
Okay, so when people have cocaine, they get really happy. They want more of it, and in general, they seem to be to really want it. So clearly, the best and healthiest thing we should do is give everybody cocaine, right? And this logic being, like listening to QA. This is specifically talking about listening to well, not QA, but QA, but beta feedback rather. And like, okay, the players are saying they want this, but that's not actually going to be good for the health of the game. That's not actually going to be what people really want.
That's something that I remember with Hive Time, talking about game design with some people who were players and not really kind of understanding what was going on, explaining to me that they felt like they wanted something and I'm not doing anything about it. And I'm like, yeah, but that want sets you up in a particular way that shows a particular frame of mind that I think is important for engaging with the game in a positive way later on. And so I front load opportunities to have resource shortfalls before I give you access to resource reserves, so that when you get the resource reserves, you immediately know what they're for. And you can kind of break that down. You can go, okay, well, people say that they want the bees to live longer, and I'm like, well, you might feel like you want the bees to live longer, but you don't. In fact, it would probably be better for you if the bees lived a shorter time, because the bee lifespan is effectively the delay that it takes for your actions to manifest themselves within the population. Like you have to have the population churn before all of those changes become present. And so when people are going, oh, I wish my bees didn't die, I'm like, that's not a problem.
You say that, but you don't actually.
And you can boil it down. You can go, you're playing SimCity and you wish you had more money. If I gave you a button that you could press to get more money, that would solve that want, but it doesn't necessarily make for an interesting game.
Exactly. Or everything about Chimera Squad. I mean, the director of Firaxis, one of the lead programmers at Firaxis, I don't recall their name, said, given the opportunity, the player will optimize the fun out of a game.
I believe that.
And look at what the optimal way to play XCOM is.
Coming back to RNG, I helped out with a game called Assault Android Cactus, which is a very, very cool twin-stick shooter shmup thing that I love very much. But people play it and they come away with the impression that things are random, but the game does not use any random number generation at all. Everything is based on like the amount of time that has started since the level started, or your character's position within the level, or how many enemies are on screen. So it uses a lot of contributing factors to sort of generating values and working out conditions for whether or not things should happen that can feel random, but sort of not necessarily reliably, but to an extent end up being reproducible. They're kind of responding to the player's actions. And I think that's really interesting from like score optimization perspectives and speedrun perspectives. I think the game is also
a whole
tuned...
different conversation. Yeah. Jeez.
Oh yeah.
Sorry.
I think the game is tuned in a way where, regardless of whether it's random or not, it provides interesting experiences. But there are players who come out the other end feeling like it had random stuff going on and criticizing the game for relying on random, relying on RNG. And it's like, well,
okay, but no.
Yeah, that's not happening. It's your perception that it's happening that you have a problem with. If we actually have a discussion about it, the game isn't providing you with uninteresting experiences.
And on the flip, and then the next layer of that, there's a certain point where, well, if that's what the player feels, then it's also not conveyed effectively. So like it does wrap around in that direction, but
yeah. I mean, the experience that they have is the experience that they have, regardless.
Right.
But it is the cultural perception and the cultural baggage that RNG has that leads to them feeling like they've had a negative experience.
Definitely.
And that's just, it's very difficult to unpack, and it's very difficult to directly combat without reinforcing some of those stereotypes.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. Like Bad Egg uses, like I just randomly place obstacles based on a couple of conditions, and then after the level is generated, I run back through and cull out anything that gets in the way of like a navigable level. So I guarantee that the level is finishable, but use strongly use random stuff to get everything placed down, throw everything at the wall to start with, and then scrape off the bits that we don't want, which leads to people going, "Oh wow, this must be a very clever, not random-based generation system that you've got." And I'm like, no, that's not what it is at all. But yes, sorry, onwards.
Oh yeah, sorry. We have a whole bunch more to get through, and these are all fantastic discussions, and I love every bit of it. Let's see what we have. Reading emails after you release a game on stream. You're a famous YouTuber, and you want a few keys from a game so you can review it on your channel. I've never asked for keys for a game, but
so there's nothing. To be absolutely clear, there is nothing wrong with asking a developer for access to their game. There's nothing wrong with asking a developer if they would like to participate in some kind of giveaway thing. That can and does lead to positive outcomes for both streamers and developers. But there's a lot of people out there who are not the famous YouTubers that they say they are, and not just people, talking up their own prominence, but there's a hell of a lot of people who are just want to get some keys to stick on G2A or sell through some other key reseller, and
and you and your 15 followers might not.
And it makes me so sad that there are people who actually want to do something valuable and something useful that enriches people's lives, and that the signal to noise ratio means that they are not visible among the people who just want to make some money off your work.
When
I worked for
signal to noise.
I've worked for a bunch of other game developers over the years, and I have been employed as a comms manager in some places. And that's a person who just basically looks after ingoing and outgoing communication, and becomes like often it aligns with and sometimes encompasses community management. So you end up doing a lot of player-facing stuff sometimes as well. And I remember that for a game that had moderate visibility, it wasn't hugely successful, but it was doing okay for an indie. Working through the email, like incoming email, and identifying which key requests were scams and which weren't was effectively a full-time job, right?
Wow. Yeah,
and
I
think
believe
about
it.
That's for a game that doesn't sell like millions of copies. But wages for someone to do that full-time on top of all of your other development overheads is just... That's huge. That's so much effort.
Onwards?
Onwards.
Indies when free GameDev asset sites tell them to only download for personal use, but you end up using it in commercial games anyways. That's a quick way to lose all of your money.
Yeah, that's not me.
No.
I mentioned before that I struggle to justify using proprietary software even when I am interested in it and am legally allowed to do so. I'm like,
But I've seen this. I've seen this plenty of times, though.
Oh yeah, there are a lot of people who do it. And there are a lot of people who feel like it's okay. And I'm not necessarily making a judgment call here. I'm just saying that this is not where my sensibilities lie. But there are a lot of people who go, oh, it doesn't matter if I use other people's work or other people's copyrighted content in my mood boards, or it doesn't matter if I use other people's copyrighted content for my placeholder stuff.
Yeah, no, I think that's fine, but you have to remember which ones are which.
But that's still, if you're operating with the intent of creating commercial output, then I think you're still using that in a commercial context. And I think in general, it's good to support people. Like I don't think it makes sense to disrespect creators' licensing and needs.
Okay.
Just because your thing isn't released. But again, like that's a tricky area. A, impossible to police, and B, there are a lot of different interpretations of copyright law out there, and a lot of different copyright law in different countries as well. So it's a tricky and I think that whole like put placeholders in and that's okay becomes a very slippery slope, because often you will engage with, like, is it okay to have that placeholder stuff in a game when you give builds to QA? And most people go, oh yeah, I guess, maybe. And then you go, okay, well, what about when you're doing beta testing with people who are outside of your company? What about when you're giving it to a marketing organization, you're like sharing it outside your organization? Does that then start to become problematic from an infringement perspective?
The dangerous part for me, from my opinion, is actually not even related exactly to that. It's in taking your placeholder, handing it to a creative, and saying, "Hey, I want you to make something like this placeholder that I'm giving you." Because I've seen that.
Of creative possibility space when you do that to other.
Because I've seen that with movies a lot. As you know, I have a background as an actor, so like I've seen that in movies with soundtracks or special effects. It's like, well, we can't use this audio.
Sure, yeah.
Can you make something that sounds like it and has the same BPM and has the same key change at this mark? And it's like, wow, do you want to just use this and pay for it? Well, goodness no, it needs to be our own special thing. Really, really.
And like not just even from a perspective of we want this, but with the names changed so that we can use it for our own, like so we can own it. You can arrive at a problematic situation naively by going, okay, this is the placeholder music that we've got, and that kind of works its way into your understanding of the work's identity, and suddenly you don't have the ability to view it without that, which takes away the possibility space, the creative possibility space that you have available to you. And that doesn't lead to positive outcomes, doesn't lead to people doing their best work, I don't think.
Right. I think we've exactly analyzed this enough.
Sorry, yes. Yeah.
No.
But yeah, there are a lot of people out there who definitely feel that way and probably respond that way, but it's not me.
My game idea, my game when I develop it. Oh, I love that. It's just hung up there. It's just an ornament, but at the same time, you know what? If that makes them feel better about their staircase, more power to them, right?
I always like to say that game development or making games is an exercise in humility. You'll never make all the things that you want to make. You'll never achieve everything that you want to achieve. And on the rare occasions that you do, you'll probably feel different about it in 6 months' time anyway.
Yeah.
But I think a huge part of being someone who actually releases things is finding ways to be at peace with those things that you didn't manage to quite do as much as you would have liked.
Be proud of what you made.
Yeah. Because if you can't do that, then it's going to be a struggle. It's going to be so much of a struggle the whole way.
Onwards.
Onwards.
Oh, you're a game writer? Name 5 guns. No, seriously, we gotta ship these guns next week. Please give them names.
So it's like, my immediate thought is, I haven't made a game with guns in it for nearly a decade.
But apart from that, the game writer thing was like, we need to be innovative now.
Yeah, it is. It's like turn on the tap.
It's like,
but there are some cases where this is fun. Like, if your games, if your guns have, so let's turn this into swords. There's a game that I want to make that has sapient swords in it.
Nice.
If your swords have character like that and they have a voice and they have something that they want to convey and do and characters, then that's a lot more fun to name than just a bunch of generic things. Generic weapons that don't necessarily have a lot of character to them. And I think that as a writer, that's where you want to be coming from. Like, you want to be coming from a perspective of, even if it is a bunch of generic weapons that you've been asked to name, try and think about, what is the character of those weapons? What do they mean? Where do they come from?
Create context so that you can make something interesting out of it, even if that context gets scrapped by the end of the day. That's something that was famously done all throughout the Fallout dev cycle. Was they wrote their internal documents so much of it in there of the lore that wasn't even supposed to be, that was existed as like an iceberg, like the part of the iceberg under the water that helps to keep the rest of it floating up.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you can come at it from a bunch of perspectives. You can come at it from a perspective of Desert Eagle sounds very evocative, and it does. It sounds exciting, and it sounds like it means something. But you think about a Tommy gun, and Thompson's just the name of the company that made it, right? But it carries so much baggage and meaning in our culture, and those are like two axes that you can. They're both different, but they can both give you opportunities to come up with very meaningful names for mundane things. That's my writer advice: is try and contextualize stuff, even if it's behind the scenes. It's like from a theater perspective, you want your sets to extend just a little bit beyond the stage boundary, or from a film perspective, you want your sets to extend a little bit beyond the camera frame, because it'll be noticeable if they do stop at the camera frame.
And as someone who's in that frame, having the sets extend beyond helps you exist in the space as an actor.
Yeah.
It helps me do better work.
Yeah, for sure.
Onwards.
All
right, how I thought it would be to program AI. Computer, create an Computer, create an adversary capable of defeating Data.
It's why I watched this episode recently.
Watching
TNG. In fact, this year I've been rewatching all of Star Trek.
Oh, cool.
But I like that you can interpret this in two ways. Because you can superficially you go, okay, you just explain what you want and it miraculously happens. But in the context of the episode, what Geordi meant to say was create an adversary capable of defeating Sherlock Holmes. Which was what it was meant to be. That was the thing that they were trying to do. But instead he said capable of defeating Data, and that had a lot of unforeseen consequences. And I think that unforeseen consequences is something that, as far as AI is concerned, in a broader sense, is something that is very difficult to reconcile. And we think about,
Now I'm wondering if sorry.
The general saying is like with machine learning is you train a thing to avoid the problems that you can see, and it creates the context where the machine learning system can just absorb a whole lot of other problems that aren't visible to you. Because
now I'm wondering if my mods. I'm wondering if my mods have realized the layers, or if they just put this in here at the base layer. It's great in both sides. It's great in both sides.
It's cool, and I don't refer to agent behaviors in my game as AI anymore. I guess this is like a broader philosophical thing rather than anything that's particularly related to game development. But I feel like at some point we are going to cross a threshold where we have what lots of people would probably call true AI these days.
Functional intelligence or whatever, yeah.
Yeah. And at that point, we will have a lot of difficult decisions to make. And I think before that point, we should probably be thinking about and making those decisions rather than dealing with them after the fact. But
true.
I think a civilization can really only be judged by how it treats its least well-off people, right?
I would agree.
And in that sense, if we are careening toward having sapient and sentient AI, then the way that we treat whatever that eventually be, the way that we treat the forebearers of what that will eventually be, will reflect on us.
Yeah.
And so I don't think it makes sense for me to consider my game slaves to be AI. They're not intended to be. They're meant to be reactive systems. They're not intended to be actual intelligence.
Yeah.
And I feel more comfortable thinking about it in that regard as well.
That's fair.
So that
That's fair.
when I am trying to engage with something that is truly trying to be intelligent, that I can give that the gravitas that it needs, and I haven't normalized just ignoring it. That's where I come from anyway.
That makes sense. Oh, and to clarify, in chat, Arsène Lupin is a fictional thief. It's the gentleman thief, and it's the contrast to the contrast to Sherlock Holmes, rather than being Moriarty, which is sort of in the Sherlock Holmes books. I think the contrast between Sherlock Holmes and Arsène Lupin is actually a very interesting one, and they did actually have a crossover book.
Interesting. Was that written by Doyle or co-authored by Doyle?
No,
or was that
I
something
don't recall.
later?
It's gonna bug me if I hold on a second.
Let's find out.
Arsène Lupin, LeBlanc, Maurice LeBlanc.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yes, in many ways a contemporary of Sherlock Holmes. Just yeah. Anyways, sorry.
No, it's cool.
We have many.
Do you ever find yourself in situations where you're kind of like, okay, this is going to be a simple problem. This is going to be a simple thing, and then you discover that it has depth and breadth and complexity beyond anything you could have imagined?
Oh yeah,
because I think you can apply this to much more than just AI and agent behaviors. Yeah. I think it's just like discovering new stuff.
Absolutely. Whoosh. Unoptimized game assets. Buying a better PC. I mean, hardware doesn't make you a better developer.
No.
As long as you're above a certain threshold.
Interesting. In Hive Time, you've played the game a little bit and probably played it enough to know that when you have a very large hive, it starts to slow down a little bit. And I noticed that during development, and I sat back and I thought about it a lot, and I was like, well, I could put a cap on this, like I could put a limit, and I could say this is the intended and optimized experience. This is what the game is intended to be. But if I'm making a game that might be played in another, maybe someone pulls it out in 10 years and plays it on hardware that doesn't exist today and in entirely different contexts, how does me putting a cap in there benefit the longevity of my thing? Yeah.
I remember. I mean, I'm old. I remember playing DOS games on computers that would play the DOS games too quickly.
Yep. My Amiga didn't have one, but my first IBM compatible had a turbo button.
The turbo button. Fantastic.
Good times.
Good times indeed.
But yeah, I also remember I feel like I've relied on that whole kind of maybe things will be better in the future and I don't have to think about it. But then at the same time, I have put effort into trying to optimize it and have done a bunch of post-release optimization on Hive Time.
I also remember when Crysis first came out, and there were the computer that could run Crysis at max settings was a theoretical machine.
Oh yeah, that was like a kind of fuzzy benchmark that a lot of users talked about.
Just because the game was so ambitious and so dense, and to be honest, not phenomenally optimized. But so that was a benchmark. It's like, I can play Crysis. Cool. What settings can you play on? Because like the actual high/ultra settings was just literally unattainable with the hardware that that existed when they developed the game, which is interesting, really interesting, I think.
Yeah. I don't think that's a space that I'd ever want to personally be in as a creator. Like, I'd rather make things that
people can play.
Well, it's yeah. I mean, because it was part of their marketing as well, right? That it was this like next generation. This is a game from the future kind of thing. I think is how they
they leaned into that pretty hard.
Which I think is different from kind of leaving the door open for your game to look and feel better in the future.
Yeah,
it's tricky. But I also make my own assets, and I generally don't use other people's assets, so I never kind of wind up in a situation where, well, that's not true. Sometimes I do make stuff, and I'm like, I'm just gonna leave with a high poly mesh here. I'm not gonna put in extra effort to make something smaller. But again, that's all triaging. That's all balancing out and weighing up the priorities and stuff. When you're using other people's assets, though, you have a lot less control and a lot less agency. I think.
Onwards?
Yeah.
see, my 10-year-old laptop when I add 4 gigs of RAM to it.
Wow, look at this. Is
That's
this like an art installation? Is this?
I don't know, but I want to visit it. It's pretty brilliant. You know what my favorite part about this is? My favorite part is the modern window in here.
Yeah. Like I feel like this is constructed. This is not like an old building.
I think it's both. Okay, so here's my brain thinks. I know that the older castles you can buy, like they just go on the market occasionally because, well, market. But the biggest problem with them is heat retention. They have just wretched heat retention.
Yeah.
And it looks like someone took a genuinely old building and tried to recraft it in a way that it actually retained heat, so they could actually live in it, as opposed to just either own it seasonally, like or whatever.
I can't see exactly what's going on above the parapet there, but there's something else that doesn't look like a part of the original building up there.
Oh yeah, there's a little something going on up there. I don't know what it is.
I mean, that could be about. If we look at it, almost all of the modern accoutrements are positioned at the top, like on top surfaces, which could be about heat retention.
Yeah, I also suspect that it looks perfectly fine from the other side. I think that's a pretty safe bet that
yeah.
They kept the facade from the other side.
This large chunk definitely smells like external stairs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's my assumption as well.
Which may, if this was an original building, then it may have already had external stairs, and this was a way of covering that up.
Yeah. Still neat, though.
Is there something like a drain pipe maybe coming off the top left there that doesn't look particularly original? Like right at the very top, just below the parapet. Yeah.
I can't tell. That might be.
That
might be. I think that might be a tree in the distance or something. That might be another large thing. I don't know.
You can see it in the other image as well.
I can't.
Yeah. It's kind of jutting out a little bit, but it's the same color as everything else, so it's hard to make out. It looks like a drain pipe of some kind.
Maybe.
Anyway, yeah, we always try and, in my house, try and get as much mileage out of old hardware as possible. I'm like,
oh yeah, absolutely.
My old PCs become my new servers, and yeah, I'll always hold on to all of my parts when I upgrade something so that I can get more.
Yeah.
I think I've got.
Why have a McMansion when you can have a McCastle? Okay, sorry.
No, all good.
Onwards.
I feel like we did engage with that one at first for a while. I was like, oh, we better say something about what the actual thing is talking about.
It's fine. 4 GHz CPU, 32 gigs of RAM, 2 TB fusion drive. Wow, that's working fast.
The other side of that optimization thing is a lot of people who like focus on things that are like just not relevant on contemporary hardware.
Oh yeah, the people who are playing World of Warcraft with a $6,000 computer that isn't really giving them any benefit. One of the ones that always got me was when people were playing World of Warcraft specifically, is because there were a lot of people who overbought hardware for that, and they put the game on an SSD, but because of the file architecture of WoW, because it's a DAT file system base, so that the game has thousands of DAT files that they're accessing, because they're all accessing different files. So it's actually not faster on an SSD. It's actually not faster on an SSD. Like you're not getting anything out of it compared to like running your operating system on an SSD.
Does it still also download a lot of content at runtime? Is that still a thing?
Probably. I mean, it's Blizzard, so I'm just gonna say assume yes.
Yeah.
But no, yeah, clearly you need this much power at least to run Minesweeper.
Yeah. That's the downside of my dinosaur fossil Minesweeper, is that it's all 3D, and I'm kind of like, well, it's very simple gameplay. It's not particularly outstanding or amazing in terms of what you would expect. And Hive Time as well. There are a lot of people who go, well, there isn't much going on. And I'm like, yeah, but there's like 1,000 bees, and they've all got like reasonably heavy behavior on them. It doesn't look like much, but it does add up. Yeah.
There's not much, but there's a whole lot of not much, and it ends up being more.
Yep.
Onwards. Yes?
Yes, sorry, yes.
Okay, cool. Just checking. Oh, ouch. My pain. Right now I'm working on developing a 2D horror platformer game set in space. Oh, like Minecraft. What?
Yes.
What? No. No.
So I have an interesting relationship with my family and their attitudes towards my work. My dad and I learned to program together on our first computer,
Aw,
and
cute.
he and I still collaborate on things,
Cool.
which is fun and nice. My mum and I learned to play games together on our very first computer, and I don't think she's played any of my games in the last 10 years.
Oh, interesting.
So yeah, it's tricky.
So you should play
But
together
I get
with
this
her.
with other people. Yeah, like we always played stuff together. Even single player games were like games that we played as a family. Like we would sit around and we'd talk about what we were doing and make decisions together, and then do the thing. Obviously some more arcadey games
Yeah.
were definitely things that you would kind of have one person driving and
Mhm.
everyone else would have to be quiet.
Yeah.
But we still take turns there.
Mhm.
But I really enjoy playing stuff like point and click adventures as kind of multiplayer things where we're all talking about what's going on. Or I
Yeah, make
love
it
playing
collaborative.
FTL with a room full of people. And that's fun as well. Even Don't Starve is a lot of fun when you've got a bunch of people making decisions about what what expeditions we're going to plan and how we're going to plant our crops and how we're going to grow our base and how we're going to do this and how we're going to do that, and you can just pass the controls around so that everybody feels like they're interacting with the game. But if everybody's making decisions together, it is definitely a shared experience.
Yeah, exactly. Everyone's sharing the experience together, and that's important. Onwards?
But yeah, onwards.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely wind up in situations where people don't have any understanding of what I'm doing. Oh, good times, good times.
Don't forget, remember to turn your computer off before midnight. Oh, I'm dating myself. Yeah.
Me too.
Okay. Well, it's okay. We're alive.
It's interesting. There are like a couple of things about the whole situation that I think are important to learn from, because like the wrong takeaway I think is nothing happened and therefore it was a false
Well, nothing
false
happened
thing.
because people were working so hard on it, like
Right,
nothing happened
right.
because there were devs working crunch hours for multiple months making sure that nothing happened. Like nothing happened because of how much hard work went into making sure that nothing happened, not because it just happened not to be a big deal.
Right. And there are probably many other contemporary contexts that could be relevant here that we're not going to get into, but in general there are lots of situations where there is an impending disaster, and how serious it is depends upon how seriously people take it beforehand. And the ideal situation is that everybody panics about, not panics, everybody responds to it seriously,
Everybody
takes it seriously and respects it, and then nobody is inconvenienced. And the problem that happens is often that people will go, oh well, we weren't inconvenienced, so it wasn't a problem, so we don't need to respond next time. And that's not learning from our experiences.
Fortunately, there was not a lot of money to be made on being a Y2K denier.
No.
I think we can probably leave it at that, though.
But it is an example of how a lot of people, I mean, when the convention of two-digit dates became normalized and was adopted for particular systems and particular data types and what have you, people knew that it was only going to last until the year 2000, and the attitude was, well, people will have either moved on to use other things by that time, or because there's so much lead time, the problem will have been solved in the meantime.
We're just making this for now. They're not going to be using the same software 16 years down the road,
right? And then I think what really happened was that it was just put off for too long and became a very big and expensive stress point, and a far bigger inconvenience to the people who actually helped make sure that the bad things didn't happen.
Right.
Like, banking systems didn't collapse and take down the economies of most of the world. Like that could have been fairly problematic for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But the only reason, like, that could have been dealt with in a less intense and less stressful and less risky way ahead of time if anybody had bothered to make a move on it. But it was left to the last minute, and that's kind of distressing. Seems to be a behavior pattern.
Onwards.
Poorly coded game mechanics. Beginner developer adding high quality assets. Don't worry, it's gonna look really pretty.
I really love the repeated edge on this image. On the right hand side, it's just like there's a bunch of grass that's repeated.
Yeah,
just to make.
But it's not up here.
No, I think it's probably to make the bottom image as wide as the top image, because the clouds do not belong in that picture, I suspect.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Yeah, because that shrub in the background is repeated as well.
Yeah,
interesting.
Good eye.
Yeah,
good eye.
Is this something that that you feel like you struggle with? Because I always these days and a long time back, like I try and focus on finding the spirit of my work, the essence, the soul, whatever you want to call it. Like Bad Egg was just cubes and a sphere until it was playable, and then I put stuff in that made it look pretty,
Yeah, I guess the way I would phrase it.
I don't work this way, but I know that a lot of people do take this kind of approach where they feel like they need to see stuff that carries the atmosphere and the aesthetics that they want to go for, because that helps them focus on what it is that they want to achieve with the lower level systems.
I feel like everybody says the game mechanics and the gameplay is more important than the graphics, and they're trying to convince themselves that that's true, when at the end of the day, people see your graphics before they experience the gameplay. And people see the graphics before they buy the game and experience the gameplay at all. So there's definitely a genuine statement to be made that if you don't have good enough graphics to catch somebody's interest, you don't have good enough graphics to sell your game. That doesn't fix the fact that you need a good game mechanic. You need a good game underneath the hood to make it, the game fun, or to make the game, a good game. But I can see a lot of developers saying, "Oh, graphics aren't important," and kind of ignoring the whole first impression of the game on a wide audience.
It's interesting, because obviously what constitutes good graphics and what constitutes bad graphics is highly subjective, and different audiences are going to have different, broad sensibilities. But I think about stuff like Dwarf Fortress, which has a fairly large audience of people who are very passionate about it. But they're also looking at adding a graphical mode that I think is aimed at bringing in a larger audience that wouldn't be interested in the ASCII visual aesthetic that the sort of initial versions have. And it's interesting to think about what that means for the identity of the project.
Yeah.
And which bits are fluid and which bits aren't.
And what?
But I think it's another example of where, like, they definitely prioritize doing gameplay over over aesthetic considerations. That said, I think that the ASCII art that they have looks neat. Like, I don't think that was something that didn't have thought or effort put into it.
But yeah, like, I can understand where this is coming from, is what I'm saying. Like, this is not great, but I can understand the mentality that leads to this, is what I'm saying. Yeah, Minecraft known for its graphics.
I mean, Minecraft does look good, though. There's a lot of aesthetic and design choices that go into it that kind of make it pretty neat for the most part.
And let's be honest, stylization ages better than high definition. It always has, and it always will.
Yeah.
I mean, Final Fantasy VI looks better than the original Final Fantasy VII. Today.
My Final Fantasy literacy is very, very low.
High quality sprite graphics versus first generation polygon graphics.
Yeah. It's interesting as well. Like, you think about stuff like Grim Fandango. I'm not sure if you're super familiar with that, but that's a game that kind of was made by people who weren't saying, how can we make our 3D look more realistic? That was made by people who said, how can we make stylistic decisions that embrace the constraints that our 3D work has?
Wind Waker is a good example too.
Yeah. My Zelda literacy is very, very low, but I know at least what that looks like. That's another good example. I love Grim Fandango because it's not something that I don't know if you've seen the remastered version. The remastered version does look a lot nicer, but it doesn't change the design of the characters and doesn't change, anything really. The dynamic lighting is really cool, but
I like that in the Monkey Island remakes you actually have a button to the press to go back to the original graphics at any time because they're actually still there underneath the remake's polish.
Well, Grim Fandango does the same thing.
Oh yeah.
And
yeah. Sorry.
yes, and it's I believe that it's still running the original Grime scripts and most of the Grime engine beneath.
Nice.
In the same way that the Monkey Island special editions did, where they're running the original Scum code. Well, they're not using Scum VM. They're using the original Scum engine with a wrapper around it that intercepts the the resource loading calls and passes in the remastered or not remastered assets on the fly, depending upon what's needed. Like I said, I worked on Day of the Tentacle, which uses that same engine, and so when I worked on that, I got to see all of this original code from the 80s that was written in C by people who. It was such a time capsule. It was like a core sample of LucasArts history. It was wonderful to see from the inside, which is definitely a tangent.
Onwards then?
Onwards.
Okay. One does not simply become a video game developer by playing video games a lot. I know people with this mentality, like, I know a lot about video game design on account of how many video games I've played. Like, no, I'm sorry, friend, you don't.
Yeah, it's tricky. It's tricky. I think, it comes from... I don't know, is it Dunning-Kruger effect? Is that what we call it? Is that the thing where people don't realize quite how ignorant they are?
They don't realize how little they don't have the tools necessary to be able to understand how little that they actually know. Yeah, that's how I like to phrase it. At least.
They don't have the perspective to understand their perspective. Yeah, which is it's okay, and it's all part of learning, and I think that's kind of natural. I don't necessarily know that it's a hard and fast rule, but I'm more interested in what people want to express with their work than I am in what people want to experience from a work. And so if someone wants to make something that doesn't quite resonate with other people in a particular way, then that's still valid. Even if it's an unexperienced person who's making something that they don't really understand what they're doing, that's okay.
As long as you look at this and see it as a starting point, as opposed to saying, well, clearly I know this because I've played games for the past 15 years.
Right.
Like, no, hold up, sit down.
there is a very strong attitude of, I may not make games, but I know what I like, and I can identify what's good and what's not. And it's like, well, you can identify what you like and what you don't like, and you can identify what's good for you and what's not good for you. But if we want to have a culture of game development, if we want to consider game development to be a craft, then what constitutes doing well at that craft, what constitutes well-performed craft, is something that only other craftsmen can really appreciate. And that sounds like it's dismissive of people with less experience, but it comes down... It's all like the forces of having a medium that has been hyper-capitalized, hyper-commercialized since its inception, pretty much. Like no other medium that we've ever had to deal with has had this level of rapid commercialization.
And 1980s animation.
But
it's very similar.
Animation as a medium had sort of still been around for a while. It's like stylistically, yes, but there were still people. There was still a lot of medium sensibilities and craft sensibilities that had been kind of established previously, and stuff external that could be drawn upon in a much more relevant way, whereas there's not a lot that's relevant specifically to game, like holistically relevant to game development, that we can draw upon from outside of game development.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
We can get a little bit from sports and we can get a little bit from board games, but that only touches on a very specific and narrow slice of games as a whole still, I think. it's tricky. I think about I'm the engine that I'm making for that game that I mentioned that I've been working on for 6 years.
Mhm.
It's I won't get too deep into it, but it's a game where it's a text adventure, but it has analog controls and it has a first-person style camera movement system. So if you think about what would Myst be like if you could like use the mouse to move the camera around, but you stand still, right? Like as opposed to having discrete screens that you press an arrow to move between. You click on exits to move to another scene, but within the scene you can use mouse look to look around. But it's text based, and you don't see any of the world that's around you. It just does raycasts out and gives you a description of what you're facing. And there are a lot of things that when I show it to people and when people play the demo, they go, "Oh wow, this would do really well for." There are a bunch of very common things that people say. People say that it would be good for a horror game. People say it would be very good for a game about being blind. And a lot of people who think about, I'm like, I'm not blind. It's not my story to tell. I'm happy to work with other vision impaired people and assist them in making and expressing things. I would like my engine tools to be blind accessible when I release them. So I don't want to preclude that, but that's not for me. But it's the obvious and an immediate response, and everybody has it. And same with the like kind of horror thing. And people go, "Oh, it would be really cool if like you look at a chair and then you look away and then you look back and it's gone." And I'm like, I understand that that's
Would
the
it,
first
though?
impression. I understand that that's the first impulse and that's the first instinct that you have. But I experimented with all of that, and I discovered that you don't go, "Oh, the chair has moved." You go, "Oh, the chair was somewhere other than where I think it was."
Right, makes
And
sense.
because you don't have very much in the way of spatial cues, you kind of need to rely on the consistency of the environment to be able to play effectively and have a positive gameplay experience. And so it's a similar kind of thing where people just they brush with the concept and they have all of the first ideas that people sort of seem to commonly have, and it takes them a little bit more time to come to the understanding that that doesn't lead to good experiences. And so I'm going to add these features into the engine, I think, but I'm going to put them behind a sort of use at your own risk type disclaimer, so that I can give people enough rope to hang themselves, but I want them to understand that these paths have been trodden and they can learn from my experience if they want to learn from my experience.
Onwards?
Which I think kind of resonates with where that particular that last one is coming. Yes, onwards, sorry.
That feeling you get when a player writes a negative review about not having a feature that's actually in the game.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you can only influence the reviews and the player's experience so much. And honestly, I'd say this reflects on you for maybe not presenting that feature possibly, or you just can't account for humans.
I mean, different people are different people. They have different perspectives. They've led different lives. They have different expectations, and they will experience things differently. And that's got to be okay at some level, because no game can be all things to everybody. But I did have one,
except for Star Citizen, obviously.
I had a published review by a journalist who made a whole bunch of assertions about Hive Time that were not factually correct. And I reached out to them and I said, "Hi, look,
hi, what the heck?"
Well, it was someone I knew as well, and I felt a little bit I didn't want to necessarily alienate that person or destroy the. I don't feel like I was particularly close to them, but I did have some connection, some kind of relationship with them, and I didn't really want to destroy that. But I sent them a message and I said, "Hey, look, here's how this works. Here's how that works. Here's how that works. I will have a think about what I can do to make that stuff more readable. But I thought I should let you know." And I was kind of hoping that they would consider updating their review or giving it another review
retraction
with that knowledge in mind. But they didn't, and I still feel kind of sad about that.
Yeah, that's really, I understand.
That's
Yeah. I
onwards.
had
Oh.
that I mentioned Bone Sweeper earlier, my Minesweeper game, and I don't want to be mean. Again, this isn't intended to be mean-spirited, and it isn't intended to make fun of a person. But there was someone who, when I released it, left a comment saying, "Oh wow, this is a really cool." Because in addition to digging up fossils, the other thing I was thinking was, would Minesweeper be interested if you had some kind of sense of progression or meta progression, and the idea of you dig up fossils and then you later go and assemble the fossils that you've dug up into skeletons? That's exciting. In the trailer, it shows some of that, and this player had latched onto and kind of fixated on that, and they were like, "Oh wow, this looks like a really cool spin on a jigsaw puzzle." And I was like, "Oh, okay, if that's how you're approaching the game, that's how you're approaching the game, and sure." And then they came back with this big long list of feedback about how they didn't enjoy the dig phase, and they had, they framed their post as this big list of feedback, and they at the start they said, I played this, I thought it was really cool. There were some bits that just didn't feel like they worked very well. What do the numbers mean?
So they missed the game entirely. They missed what the game was, and in favor of what they hoped the game was, which is actually an interesting thought process.
I click somewhere, and I sometimes it disappears one square, but sometimes it gets rid of a whole bunch, and I feel like it shouldn't. Like, it should just let me click on all of them. And I had to respond with like, okay, so this is a genre convention.
The game is presupposing a knowledge of Minesweeper.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't, because it gives you instructions, and there's part of me that goes, well, if you were encountering something unknown, maybe it would have been good to read the in-game instructions.
Yeah, but
and I think in a bigger
we
version
both
of the game,
know how that
tutorialized. Yeah. In a bigger version of the game, I would definitely put more effort into tutorializing things. But yeah, I kind of had to say, so the game is about deductive reasoning, and the numbers are your tools. The spaces that don't have numbers on them, the empty spaces, represent dead space in terms of the information that you can get out of them. You don't get any information from an empty square. A square that has numbers on you tells you something about the things that you need to find out.
Yeah, it tells you something about your
empty square doesn't. So we just get rid of all the empty squares to remove the tedium. And so yeah, I sort of said, here's a rundown on what Minesweeper's identity is, and here are where you can find the instructions in game that kind of guide you towards playing. But if you don't want to play that, I've already got I've got something set up so that you can just do the assembly part as it's like a practice mode, and you can just do that if that's the only bit that you want to do. And yeah, so it is interesting to see how different people approach different things. I'm totally cool with people approaching that game without any knowledge of Minesweeper, and I find that really interesting, and I find it interesting to see how they engage with it. But I don't think it means that I made the wrong game, or that the game itself has fundamental problems.
Hello, Caro. Nice to meet you. Onwards?
Yes.
Okay.
Let's go.
Me wanting to make a game. Possible scope? Funding? Mental health? Ooh. That, It stings.
Yeah. I see a lot of... I feel very thankful that I avoided a situation where this would happen, and all of my experiences with... Well, the majority of my experiences with significant burnout have come from non-game related things. But yeah,
it's a juggle. It's the same thing as what we saw earlier, where we're having to juggle so many different projects and hats. Like, don't forget to manage yourself.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't want to like misrepresent my own journey. There are games. I mentioned that list that I have of games I want to make. The very first item on that list is
bucket list.
Effectively something Star Citizen scale.
Oh no.
So like, the first big game that I wanted to make was a big game that I think I think as I progress and as I grow as a developer, I think I will come to find ways to scope that down and find ways to utilize the skills that I have and focus on maximizing those areas to make it achievable. Like I think I will make that game someday, but it was impossible to be made by myself and the team that I had at that time. We were optimistic about chasing it, though.
But you didn't chase it down until you died from it.
Yeah. That said, there are other games that I worked on, like one of the first public games that I released was a Half-Life mod, which I made while I was working on another Half-Life mod, and it was like the first Half-Life mod that I made was meant to be serious. Well, the first Half-Life mod that I was working on was meant to be serious, and then because myself and the other people that I was working with were silly people, we had a whole lot of silly stuff that was totally inappropriate, and we stuffed that into another mod and released it as its own thing, and that was fun. But the main mod, we were trying to do something episodic before episodic games were a thing. We were trying to tell a story in a multiplayer game before anything that I can think of had tried to do that as well. I had written 40,000 words of a novelization to go with it. We had some working on cutscenes. We had mapped out the entire structure for the thing, and it was absolutely enormous amount of work and effort.
I think it's a bit about beyond the scope of looking at memes, though.
Yes. Well, it turned out to be beyond the scope of what a couple of like half dozen college kids could make with no experience as well.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah. So I've definitely been on that, but it's not a space that I'm in anymore.
Yeah. Onwards.
Sorry for the tangent.
Oh, that's quite all right. When the first pieces of fan art of your game gets is Rule 34.
Oh, I see. Yes.
So
I've managed to avoid that so far.
I haven't.
That
Fun story. Actually, not related to VTubing at all. Actually.
Oh no! Is this as an actor?
Yep. Well, kind of.
Okay.
The first piece of fan art that I ever received from anything was when I was a side character in a friend's webcomic.
The word "received" here is kind of
Nope,
making the hairs on the back of my neck stand up.
Keep that word in mind because this was sent to me directly. A fan art of me and my real life best friend at the time.
Oh no!
Making out.
Good times.
And it was like, okay, that's a thing. This must be normal. This must be what happens when you're in the public light. Okay. Oh.
Yeah. So like, I feel like on some levels you're like, however people want to explore and express their sexuality to themselves is fine. But maybe don't engage with, like, don't send that stuff to strangers, you know?
Yeah, maybe perhaps not. Honestly, I took it as a compliment. Someone was that, excited and passionate about our characters that's how they felt. It's like, okay. I didn't really realize... I didn't realize how weird and creepy it was until later, because this was some of my first experience in Limelight, and it's like, oh, okay, that's just a thing that happens. Sure, okay. Like, I didn't really process it enough at the time until I was telling a story to someone, and they were like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they would do that. I'm like, wait, what? Is that not normal?
Yeah. I think that's another reflection of how celebrity is dehumanizing. It makes you as a human, as an individual, less able to be a human and an individual. You're now expected to be accessible and objectifiable to a whole lot of other people in ways that I don't think is really healthy for a person.
Well, it depends on how well you can. It depends on. I
mean, there are ways to cope with it for sure.
Yeah, it depends on how well you can cope with it, and it depends on how willing you are to. How can I phrase this? It's a tough thing to phrase.
But like statistically speaking, if you've got an audience of 10 people...
That's not entirely a negative thing. Being someone in the public eye does require you to be of a different mindset, but that doesn't make it a bad mindset, if that makes sense.
The thing I think about it is like it's not scalable, right? Because if you've got 10 people in your audience, then you can know those people, you can have an interaction with them, you can be present to some extent within their lives, and that's fine. When it's 100,000 people, that's just not possible. But celebrity culture encourages people to feel like they have a personal connection with you when they don't.
Right.
And that can become isolating for the person who is the celebrity.
It can. It absolutely can. And honestly, after a certain threshold, the numbers just become people. My biggest audience, outside of...
At some point, there's going to be, statistically, the larger your group of people, the more likely it is to contain someone who has very different sensibilities and is not capable of interacting within the boundaries of socially acceptable norms. You're going to have an axe murderer in there somewhere eventually. The bigger you get, there's going to be one,
Oh no, that I've always known that it's like something like, how would the phrase go? 1% of people will hate you for no reason that's within your control. 0.01% of people will actively wish you harm for no reason that's within your control. And at a certain point, those numbers are meaningless in day-to-day life. They become an inevitability as an actor.
Yeah, and there's also the aspect of like one person's funny joke is another person's call to action.
But
it gets very tricky very fast.
For me, 2K, after you have like 1,500 or so people in the audience, it just becomes the audience. It's difficult. You don't. Yeah, my biggest live audience was 35,000, and at that point, it was just one one audience.
Beyond human scale.
It was beyond human scale, but that doesn't mean that it's. It was sort of terrifying in like a eldritch horror sort of way, but in the fact that you're seeing something beyond human scale. But at the same time, it was like, okay, it was somehow less terrifying than doing something in front of 10 judges.
Yeah.
Or a critic, or doing a thing in front of 3 people plus one person who's going to write a review on it. Like all of a sudden, that has more personal consequences than the massive audience. That's my take, at least. That's my 2 cents from acting.
Until one of them decides to try and follow you home.
Well, true. Onwards.
Dear, onwards.
Friendship ended with Capsule. Now Mannequin is my best friend.
It's always interesting. It's like I've never had a placeholder like that. Like I kind of make everything, and this is like a way that I exercise my skills as a generalist and a solo developer. When I'm a solo developer, is that I just make all my stuff, make all my placeholder stuff, and don't end up using a lot of this thing. But I did work briefly on the GD Quest third-person mannequin project. And that was kind of fun to have a thing that I didn't make that I was using to build and develop behaviors and interactions with.
Yeah, I personally like using. I can visualize the project better when I have something that's somewhat representative of the project, even if it is a prototype. At least having a prototype over a capsule helps me visualize the direction of that things are going to go.
Yeah, and I'm a big proponent of using concept art as placeholder art. It's a lot easier with 2D stuff, obviously, but I think you can still do that kind of basic blocking out of forms and things in 3D, and then pull that across as your placeholder stuff, and that gives you a much better sense of how your final assets are going to fit into the thing than capsules and stuff do.
Without necessarily coloring you in the same way that that the copyrighted placeholders we discussed before would.
Right, exactly.
Audience is a Cthulhu monster. We need to do a weird chant to summon them, and they have indescribable power over you. You know what? That's right. Hold on, I have to push the button. There. 1 sec. I have to push the button now.
Okay.
Wait, it didn't do the thing. Why didn't it do the thing?
Button, why? You're meant to do that. You've got one job, Button.
Where is it? Heck, beans. Oh well, I was supposed to pop up my comment and subscribe thing.
Yes. Smash that like button. Ring my bell. Whatever.
Whirlwind slam the subscribe thing.
Suplex that favorite thumbs up.
Ah.
Goodness me.
Good times. Hold on a second. Where is...
That's something I struggle a lot with. I have a lot of trouble soliciting
that's too big.
that kind of stuff. I just... It's not who I am. Oh, there it
There
is.
we go.
Hello.
Excellent. Onwards!
Onwards!
Game prototyping expectations? Game prototyping reality.
Yeah.
Yeah?
It ties back into a lot of the stuff that we were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, Hive Time was literally a bunch of colored cubes and a white sphere for I wouldn't say a long time. It only took me, I think, a week to really nail down the experience of playing the game. But yeah, I just didn't prioritize making assets because I knew that I wouldn't need to until I'd found out how the game was going to work and whether or not it was feeling good.
Yeah. I think we've covered it. I think we've covered a lot of this part, so I think we can just onward for now. Yeah. Polishing the game I almost finished. Prototyping some stuff I dreamed of last night.
I feel
Let's
like
go.
we covered this as well.
Let's go.
I did once have a game that I, again, intend to make at some point, which kind of came to me fully formed when I woke up in the morning after dreaming of playing that game. And it happens sometimes. But I think jumping on it immediately after you wake up is not the best course of action.
Might not always be healthy, but you know what? Sometimes maybe.
Yeah, if you've got the time and you've got the free, free time and energy to do it, then go nuts.
Yeah. Game development, how I expected it to be. Okay, that's... Sure. How it's actually like...
Yeah.
Crunch, imposter syndrome, looking up Stack Exchange. Yeah, no, that's...
Imposter syndrome's another one that I feel like I've managed to sidestep. I don't think I've ever had that, but I have this strong belief that the most important and intrinsic quality to my work is that I made it, and nobody else can bring that to the table. And I think that allows me to latch on to feeling like my work is justified and my role as a creator is justified.
Yeah. For me, I worked through imposter syndrome as an actor before I started streaming, so like I've kind of already worked through those emotions before I came here to YouTube. So for me, it's okay.
I don't want to like push my framing onto other people. How everybody's relationship with themselves and their work is going to be different. But my general feeling is that imposter syndrome stems from problems with self-esteem health, and that a healthy self-esteem doesn't really leave a lot of room for imposter syndrome to exist. So I suppose if somebody is trying to tackle that stuff, that would be
what we were discussing
something
before,
to consider looking at.
What we were discussing before about how about being in the public eye being different than your own self-esteem and your self-esteem as an actor or as a creator can be two different.
Some separation between
some separation.
You and your work is important too, for sure.
Anyways, onwards.
One thing I was just gonna say, I see people talking about stuff being abandoned, and it really in this kind of list of things that get thrown at people who try to be game developers and try and make stuff. I see people talking about released projects getting abandoned, and I'm like, releasing a thing is by definition the opposite of abandoning it. Like
Yeah.
you can't abandon something that you've released. And yet I had people who were like, I told people that Hive Time was a finished project when I released it, and I had someone say that I had abandoned it. And I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? I
Yeah.
released it.
Mm-hmm.
Made me very grumpy.
The expectation of ongoing support is something that's really interesting in video games that's not there in tabletop games. The expectation of ongoing support.
It's not there for films. It's not there for books.
Yeah.
It's not there for music. It's not there for like
Actually,
really
I would.
anything.
You could kind of argue that it is there for films. The expectation of a director's cut, the expectations of commentary tracks, less than video games.
But I feel like that's happening. Like in terms of the rise of streaming services seems to have diminished the number of people doing physical media, and you just don't kind of see commentaries and stuff on streaming services these days. So like,
That's
I feel
fair.
like there's less extreme and less solid, or at least consistent expectation for that stuff to happen, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, there are definitely people who want it, and definitely people who are vocal about wanting it for sure.
Mm-hmm. Onwards. Let's see. GameDev engine dev. There's a new version of our game engine coming out. Oh, so my game will run better, right? My game will run better, right? It will run, right?
It's tough. It's tough to make a general purpose tool that is maintained, or not maintained, developed, right? Because it's like people always want new features, and you put new features in. That's development rather than maintenance.
And I can.
It's
the number of
we were
people
talking
who
about
are
backwards
still
compatibility as well.
Yeah,
earlier.
plus backwards compatibility, like the number of the number of programs that I use that are still running on, that were created and require a version of Unity that is now 4 years old, because it doesn't work on the new one, so we're not touching it.
But it's also like, even if it does work, you don't know. Right? You don't know what unexpected problems are going to rear their head, and if you've got a stable tool that you know how to use, it doesn't necessarily make much sense to change it. I'm still using Blender 275 for a bunch of my stuff because I know how to do the work that I do in it, and there's nothing. I will upgrade at some point. There will be a feature that I value enough to say, I want this, I will go out and get it. But until there is something that I'm specifically going to benefit from, there's no reason to disrupt my workflows and my work environment for.
But number go up.
Yeah. The culture of like constantly pushing up engine versions is tricky as well, because you often end up with people who are. I mean, I worked on a game where our system requirements changed like a year after launch, and that ended up leaving a couple of users behind, and that's real tricky to. I feel like you've got some responsibility to make sure that the game as it was is still there and available to anybody when you do upgrades and changing, and that's another QA overhead that a lot of people won't necessarily be willing to embrace when moving up to new engine versions.
Right.
It's tricky.
All right. Working in Unreal Engine 4, moving object to 0.1 units, rebuilding nav meshes, lighting needs to be rebuilt, in the distance, sirens.
Yeah.
It's the same as, trying to move an image in Microsoft Word, or like, something like that. It's like, oh, I just created a chain reaction. Oh no. Oh, there goes everything.
And when you've got tools that have things that are slow, and you need to like embrace that as part of your workflows, it does have an impact on your output, I think. Sometimes not all bad. I'm a big proponent of not working faster than you can think. I like to work slow in a way that gives me time to reflect on my stuff while I'm doing it. And I remember trying to think of which anecdote. I've got a whole bunch of anecdotes about this. I remember I worked on I was on the organizing committee for an international Linux conference at one point, and I was doing a bunch of graphic design for it, and the version of Inkscape that I used, I built a development version because there was a specific feature that I wanted to use that would help do what I wanted to do. the downside was that there were some optimizations yet to come, and the image that I was working on was so complex that to move one vertex would take like 10 minutes. And I think I put about 1,000 hours into that project, all up. But the thing was that during those breaks, those 10-minute breaks, I could go and work on something else in the meantime, and I'd come back and see the results with fresh eyes, and that was of value to me.
Nice.
So yeah, it's tricky, but yeah, I know I haven't used Unreal Engine 4. I don't really like their user agreement, so I never ended up making an Epic account.
Yeah.
But yeah, I know a lot of people who struggle with this, and yeah, I hope that workflows that don't require a lot of those constant real-time munging of assets during development is. I hope that kind of drifts into the background at some point.
Yeah. Onwards. When you're testing your game to balance stuff and you actually enjoy your playthrough.
It's interesting. I know lots of different people who. I know lots of people who never play their own games.
Really?
Yeah. And in fact, I feel like I see that in a lot of spaces. Like I know people who write and don't read their own books. I know people who paint and don't really spend much time looking at or appreciating their own paintings. And yeah, I know people who don't play their own games, particularly people who like work in a studio and do it as like their full-time professional job type thing.
I'll occasionally watch my own streams to see what I can improve upon. I feel like being able to look at your own work and assess it is a big part of being able to improve as whatever
I think
whatever
so
that
too.
is.
I think so too. I think you've got like if you're working at a game studio, you usually are going to have plenty of time to reflect on your work and come back and look at your work before it ships or even after it ships without actually having played the game. But yeah, I feel like it's very, very common for developers to not play their own games, and I feel like that's not necessarily maintaining a healthy relationship with your work.
Yeah,
and just even outside of personal growth and improvement, it's like if you can't. There's something very healthy and, at least for me, very important about being able to enjoy the games that I play. The games that I make, sorry.
Yeah. Onwards? Stinking at your own game can make things challenging. Creating a skill check? Testing a skill check. Because you have to grapple with the fact that you're going to have players that are better than you, right? Like
Definitely.
you need to create challenges for players that are going to be better at your game than you are.
Or at least you need to define where the domain of stuff that the game is designed for exists, and how that maps to your own personal skills. It's something that will vary from project to project. But yeah, it's like I mentioned Assault Android Cactus. It has a hard mode, or even like Crypto the Necrodancer, I think, has a character called Coda, which requires like perfect play at double time, I think.
Yeah,
and
something
you
along
can't
those
attack
lines.
normally either. Coda is crazy, and I'm pretty sure the developer has never played the game from start to finish with Coda.
There's also
But players
famously an
have.
example in I Want to Be the Guy where the creator made a section, playtested it, got it in the first try, left it in. Turns out that it's like a frame perfect at 60 frames per second trick, and it's like, oh,
Nice.
huh. I mean...
Yeah. That's someone in chat just raised looking at old sketchbooks. I know artists who like agonize about being haunted by their old stuff and embarrassed by it and not feeling comfortable with its existence. And I'm like, wow, I just can't imagine being in a frame of mind where I wouldn't be enjoying and benefiting from
being proud of it.
Being able to look at my old stuff and yeah.
Being proud of how far you've come.
Yeah.
Onwards.
I think there's a lot of depths that you can plumb there for feeling self-worth, I think.
I agree.
But yes, onwards.
Ah, yes. At the local deli. Please refrain from discussing mathematics while in line.
Wow.
There's
I
a
mean, I
story
know what
there.
this is about. I mean, it's much more mundane and much less interesting than it might sound. But if you are working somewhere where you have to give people change and do small arithmetic in your head, you don't want other people talking numbers while you're trying to do that stuff. I suspect.
I was
that's
thinking that
probably
people
what
were
it is.
talking about like either a scam or some way of compounding things to get free stuff out of the store. Like I figured that there was some sort of exploit people were talking about.
I like the idea of people like having a big punch up in a queue about Fermat's theorem or something.
That would be me. That would. I honestly, I think that unironically has been me at multiple points.
Good times.
Onwards. Oh dear. What is the collision mesh for this object? I am directly being called out here.
Yeah, I'm not very good at naming my layers. I'm not very good at naming my meshes. I'm not very good at that stuff. Although with Bone Sweeper, I did a bunch of like automated export things that require stuff to be named, and so I was good for that. And I found that building my own asset pipelines where names matter was a good way of forcing me to do that.
Force you to be better.
Yeah.
Nice. Onwards.
Onwards.
Oh, same
well, that's
idea.
The same thing again.
Yep, that's it. That's the same joke, but I love it. Onwards, I think. Oh, okay. Here we are still. I mean, it resonates though. Like, it's
I mean, that's what we
completely
do
fair.
because we make the high complex asset, and that's the visual thing that people see and care about. And the like collision meshes are usually something that we spend a lot less time on, and they're like the quick concave hull that we've created around a thing and just leave with the default name.
It's fine, don't worry about it. Yeah. What do we have? Scratch. I'm not familiar. Are you familiar with Scratch?
So Scratch, yeah, Scratch is like meant to be a beginner first programming language. The sort of jigsaw puzzle type nested pieces in the bottom right is Scratch's programming language.
Oh no, yeah, that's right. Okay, I think I've seen this.
And so I think the text on the left is meant to be, in quotes, actual programming, and people being frustrated and overwhelmed with all of the typing and text that you need to do in order to write enough code to achieve something useful.
I assumed it was just the script of the B movie, if I'm being honest.
I mean, it doesn't look like code, does it?
No, not terribly.
But I think that the Scratch user who made this is kind of showing that they have less pain from working with a more simple system.
Fair.
Which is valid.
And if you want to press say meow for 2 seconds, you know what? Sometimes that might be the tool you need.
I have absolutely zero. I have negative interest in using visual scripting systems, but if they empower other people to do things, then I don't have any problem with that.
I respect them for learning.
Work with them.
My stance is that I respect them for learning how to make other things. Like I don't know, especially with this description with this image here. I feel like this is kind of this is great to hand to an 8-year-old to learn how a programming works, and then when they can grow up, they can learn an actual programming language.
I mean, people do make stuff with visual scripting languages, and Unreal's blueprint is letting people who don't normally do programming do things that they otherwise wouldn't be able to do, and that's valid.
Yeah, no, fair. I don't follow it, but I don't have to.
Yeah, I would find it deeply unpleasant to use myself. But yeah.
Onwards. Oh, it's another prequel meme. My hard drive just fried after 2 years of development. You saved it on GitHub, right? You use Git, right?
The number of developers I know who don't use version control is just
tragic.
Deeply disturbing.
Yeah, no. You learn Git. I mean, I don't care what kind of projects you work on. I don't care if it's Git, like any version control. Just
version control. And something where you can push up to a remote machine you're going to benefit from it at some point.
All right, if you are taking your time to watch a game dev meme review on YouTube, take the time to learn Git.
You got turn to learn some version control software for sure.
Not right now. Keep watching, please. But I mean,
we'll be doing a Git tutorial later. You can smash that subscribe button and
yeah. Wait, hold on. There we go.
There we go.
Did it not? Wait, did it?
Nope.
Didn't do the thing. I didn't do the thing.
Maybe I am good at marketing. Maybe that was good. I don't know.
No. Why isn't my button working? Oh, there it goes. Okay. It works sometimes. Anyways. I messed up Git so bad that it became Guitar Hero.
So here's the thing, is like version control tools often have a degree of... Actually, I worked on one of Henry's games, or helped out with one of Henry's games. It's one of those things where you can use it as just like a glorified backup system and have benefit from that, but there's a whole lot of other stuff you can do. Like you can use version control without knowing or caring about branches.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
use it as a progress marker and a backup point.
Yeah. And there's so much value you can get. One thing I really like to do, like I have multiple concurrent projects and I need to switch focus between things. Being able to go back and look at the diffs from my last few commits to get a feel for what I was most recently doing, or, after a late night and getting up in the morning and making sure I didn't break anything, being able to review my previous sleep-deprived commits, that's really valuable to me. And yeah, so if you're branching a lot and you have a workflow that uses that's great. But for people who don't use version control, you don't have to be stressed out by the existence of this stuff. It's optional.
Yeah, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. It's fine. Don't worry about it. Everything's fine. Onwards.
But if you do use branches, then you will probably be very familiar with that situation.
I pushed the bugs. You mean the bug fixes, right? you fix the bugs, right? It's fine. Don't worry about it.
That's what I love about Hive Time is I can say, oh, it's fine because I made a game about bugs. It's fine.
Yeah, it's all yeah, exactly.
It's bugs all the way down.
Final temp version 2. No, just no.
Final, real final.
Yes.
This time.
Final _ actual final _ final version. Do not ship.
Good times. I have a variant of this which says Happy Pi Day and ISO 8601 in Batman's speech.
Nice.
Which is kind of mean-spirited, so I don't share it around much.
Me looking at all of my
penguin.
Me looking at all of my ugly code crimes that I had to commit to get that script working in Unity. What's the biggest programming crime that you've made?
I don't know. People ask me this, and I'm like, I guess I just don't. I'm sure that I do stuff. There's lots of things where I look at things and laugh at them and go, haha, that's real bad. That's staying in. Or if I do a search for fix me in my code, I will always find notes that I've left future me of things to address. But I don't think about that stuff. It doesn't end up retaining a lot of mind share. I can't really think of any.
Hello. Pa,
Hello.
come on. Hi, I exist.
Well, welcome back. What happened there?
things exploded.
Okay. Are you all right?
Probably.
Okay, well, that's better than no.
There we go. That should be better now.
Okay.
Probably.
Good times. Yes, I didn't have a good example, but I recounted how games are all smoke and mirrors, and once I put stupid mouth sounds in as a placeholder for UI sounds, and people loved them, so they stayed. But I guess I can do a search, and whatever I come up with, I can mention. So fix me. Okay, here we go. This one says, "Fix me. What WTF, Godot? Why is this not being passed in?" So that's not me doing any crimes. That's me working around something else that kind of bugs me. What about hack? Okay, click hack. Oh yeah. I got some. I've got an input action in Bonesweeper, that is like hidden and not visible to the user, and it's called click hack, and I use it to detect whether or not you have released the mouse button, and it's a thing that only affects mice, and it's like an issue with retaining focus, and awkward. But that's me like working around something else rather than some dodgy thing that I just left in because I couldn't be bothered doing it.
Yeah.
But I'm sure there's plenty. I know that I have lots. It just doesn't have a lot of mind share. It's not something I think about a lot.
You haven't done if int equals true with the knowledge that it'll only pass if the variable is 1?
No. I do love the that brings to mind their fast inverse square root from the Quake 3 source code.
Yeah.
How it fundamentally relies on the internal storage, like memory storage of a float, and casting that to an int to be able to do bitwise manipulation on it, and then back to a float so that it can be something else. I love it.
Yeah. What if I told you that C# can be used for more than just Unity?
Yeah, it's interesting. People do tie a lot of Unity's identity to C#, and I guess it makes sense now, but it's been around for longer than Unity has been C# focused.
Onwards, I think, though. I mean, I guess, yeah.
I think we know what that's about.
Yeah, I think we can go forward, though. When I say this was the actual last commit, probably. There it is.
See, someone needs to learn amend.
I like it. I just love that probably is after actual. Like, you have actual last commit, then in caps.
Come to peace with the idea that maybe not. Yeah.
Probably, maybe, I don't know, mate.
I helped someone ship their game. Well, it's not shipped yet, but I helped someone like go through the last steps, pre-release steps, for their game, and working with the Steam partner backend. And there were a couple of things they were confused by. And I was like, okay, well, I will upload a build from here, and then I will show you what it looks like, and we can talk about it and go through it. And I did. And in the commit message, because Steam allows you to like put some messages in to describe what the changes are, so that you can internally see those and understand those. I was like, okay, final upload of Linux build. And then 10 minutes later, I went, oh yeah, there's something else I need to do.
Oh no.
And it was not the final. But Git does have the amend function, which allows you to add stuff, change the commit message for a commit. Like just allows you to replace the last commit with something new, which is kind of nice if people aren't aware.
Nice.
Onwards.
Wait, that's not it. Saves Unity project. My brain 2 minutes later. Do it again.
Yeah, we'll just tap save 5 times just to be safe.
Oh yeah.
Why not?
Absolutely.
Just in case.
Just Unity, just like everything ever.
Yep.
Why? How could it possibly be a point of failure if I do it 5 times?
I think if I release something that has a save function, I like the idea of doing like a ding when it saves so that you get some feedback. But when you do it multiple times, it'll do the same ding but increased in pitch. So you can
Ooh, I like that idea.
Right?
Oh, that's a cute idea. I like that a lot. Learn C++ in one lesson. Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, there's no
Start
shortcut for
small.
something like that. Start
Bite off.
small.
Bite off bite-sized chunks, not enormous things that you can't swallow. And be at peace with the idea of learning taking time.
Yeah. Onwards then.
Onwards.
Let's see. Dozens of individual plant, grass, brush, and tree textures and materials. No. Just one atlas texture with all foliage using one material.
I do this as an optimization thing. Particularly in Godot, like having one material that everything can share means fewer draw calls. So that was something that I did to try and optimize, because again, hive time's got, if you've got a hive with 1,000 bees in it, and then the kind of 600 to 700 odd cells that you'll have underneath supporting that, that's a lot of stuff. And if all that's broken up into, each bee has wings, which in the initial release were transparent. That's another bunch of draw calls there. And so surprisingly though, making the wings opaque did not save me much in the way of resources. All the other optimizations I had done must have either removed that bottleneck, or maybe it was not much of a bottleneck to begin with. But,
fair enough.
Definitely been there. But I do like to have separate assets for things. I don't really enjoy dumping everything into an atlas.
Onwards. I wish all riggers who check the rotation of their joints a very pleasant evening.
Have you done a lot of animation? I feel like animation is a skill that I have a broad skill set, and one of the ones that I have not sunk anywhere near as much practice into as I would like is animation. But since I'm my own rigger, I don't think I've ever worked with anybody else's animations. So I've never had to be in this situation, but I do know that if you don't have things set up the way you want them, it's intensely frustrating, and if you don't have the skills to fix them, it's a showstopper.
Apart from like live 2D stuff, my animation experience is from the other end of the microphone. So I don't follow this, but I salute it. I respect it.
Have you often? I guess this is a tangent or an aside, but do you find it more enjoyable to try and I don't know whether you've had to work with like this or not, but do you find it more enjoyable, if you have, do you find it more enjoyable to perform timed to existing animation, or do you find it more enjoyable to have people base animation based on your performance, or do the animation based on your performance?
Having the freedom to do what you want with the role is good. Sometimes the restrictions can, change it, but yeah.
That makes sense.
Onwards. Name all of your meshes before exporting them into the game, or draw 25. We'll draw all those cards then.
This feels very much like the Boxo one.
Yeah.
Again.
Yeah. It's very, very similar in theme. Let's keep it moving. Computer, you're free to back your files. There's your work. But
yeah,
now we're back on source control. Learn source control, some form of it, any form. Just yes. Learn a thing.
Yep, it's good for you. You will be enriched. It is worthwhile.
You will not regret it. One time it will save you a butt, and then that one time will make it worth it.
And it'll make you do better work in the long run, I think.
Artists using node graphic graphs. Shader graphics cool as heck. Shader graphics is amazing.
It's another, because I don't see any difference between that and visual scripting languages, node-based visual scripting languages. I feel like it's the same kind of stuff.
It is, but because art is inherently visual, it makes sense to me in a way that code doesn't. I don't like visual scripting code. Visual scripting shader graphs for art makes sense to my brain mind.
That's interesting. So like I sketch and draw and paint a bit, and so when I'm confronted with these kinds of things, it's not I'm like, I want to just push this stuff around. I just want to move this. I want to just place this thing here, but I need to think about it in a different way, and so it feels very unintuitive to me. But it's interesting and it's fascinating, very, very powerful. I saw a video on a very wonderful piece of Blender art. I think it's going to be the splash screen for a new version of Blender, which looks like this very old school oil painting of a vase of flowers or a table of flowers, I think. But it is entirely procedural. There's nothing in it that's modeled,
Cool.
from what I understand. And there was the creator doing a walkthrough of how all of the stuff worked, and it is of course available for download.
Nice.
For people to mess with themselves. But it's
Oh,
magic.
that's-
I look at it and I'm like, it's just magic. Yeah.
Your amazing character rig? Gimbal lock.
Good times.
I don't get it, but I respect it. Okay.
So like, gimbal lock is where the fidelity that you can get from defining, like it's the way that we define rotation, and how the order that you apply the rotations in can have an impact and can kind of lead you to a point where once you've moved something up to the very vertical position, rotating it around sideways doesn't do anything anymore and you kind of get stuck at the top. Does that make sense?
Okay.
That's what gimbal lock is. You're just kind of locked up there at the top. And if you're using XYZ rotation, it's very easy to wind up there accidentally. And so you've got this lovely skeleton, you're trying to pose something, but then suddenly the arm is stuck in this weird position that's very difficult to get it out of.
Oh, cool. Onwards.
Good times.
Okay, who put my cat on the Z-axis? Who did it?
This is like Godot uses Y, negative Y, I think, is up. But I'm used to Y being horizontal and Z being up. And so, I frequently wind up with with sideways things in Godot.
Onwards.
I enjoy the discussion of that that image that people know who Jason Momoa are, but they don't know who the dude who plays Superman is. It's just the man on the red carpet.
Yeah.
I mean,
whoever that
honestly,
is, I'm sure it's not, but it's Henry Cavill, right?
I didn't even know the actor's name. Now that you say it, I've definitely heard it before, but I don't have a lot of DC awareness. It's only luck that I know Jason Momoa's name, so I'm not judging.
Final boss before the fight, the final boss fight, the boss's final form revealed, and the final boss when it's been rebalanced to join the player.
Yeah, good times, good times.
I hate when you have such a major disconnect between what you can do in cutscenes and what you can do in game, and this is sort of like the flip side of that. It's like, how strong this character is when you're facing them versus how strong they are when, they're with you.
I mentioned Assault Android Cactus earlier, and I suppose this is like, maybe it's... I don't think it's actually spoiling anything, but it does set up the expectation, so I guess block your ears for 30 seconds if you don't want to hear that. But there is a enemy that you come across who you can unlock as a playable character, and it was very important to the game's designers that character, when you encounter them as an enemy and they are framed as a boss, has the same abilities as you, has the same power as you, I suppose, in terms of gameplay presence, and that it is effectively asking you to deal with yourself and still have that be challenging and doable, because often player characters are intensely overpowered compared to
because they need to be
enemies. Often, but that character was executed very, very well. I thought it was a wonderful, wonderful thing, and a lovely exception to the kind of thing that this is talking about.
Onwards.
Onward.
Me? Busy? Don't worry about it. I got a whole hour of sleep last night, so I'm raring to go.
I have been better with this. I guess nearly a decade ago now, I overworked myself a lot. I was sleeping about 3 nights a week. I was working the equivalent of like 3 full-time jobs. I was doing volunteer work, and I was cycling to work every day, and doing a lot of manual labor as well. And
Falling into the
ignored
eternal
my body.
crunch mentality.
Yeah, I ignored my body for a long time, and then lost the use of my hands, wrists, and elbows for about
Oh.
6 months.
Oh, wow.
And coming out of that, I decided to respect and listen to my body a lot more, and I make sure to sleep every night now.
That's a good plan. Yeah.
Yeah, when you ignore that stuff, I think you're living on borrowed time, and it's important to
It
listen
stacks
to what
up.
your body is telling
Absolutely.
you. Yeah. And you feel immortal until you reach a hurdle like that.
Until you suddenly aren't.
Yeah, I encourage people wholeheartedly to respect themselves. You only get one body, usually.
Onwards. Marketing a game somewhere where there is actual customers and players that might buy a game? No. Marketing a game on Twitter with fellow indie game devs.
Yep.
This is just a VTubers.png right here. So many VTubers only market to other VTubers, and it's like, nah, fam.
It's one of those things as well. Like we were talking before about craft and peers. It's important to maintain a healthy relationship and be excited by people's work within the same space.
Oh,
as your
absolutely.
own.
But you need to recognize that that's not all of your audience.
Yeah, it doesn't lead to commercial sustainability. It would be nice if it did, but I often there are some game developers I know who are like, oh no, I'll wait to buy your game when it comes out, and I'm like, I really appreciate the gesture, but like if I'm relying on your sales, that's not me being sustainable. I'm happy to give you a key, man. It's fine.
And Chad is screaming about marketing again, and you know what? Fair.
Yeah.
Onwards. Oh, thank goodness. For a second I thought I accidentally installed Origin. It's just a hurricane. Less of a...
I've been spared, Origin. I don't regret that at all.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't want to get... We've got some more stuff to go through, so I kind of... I'll save... I'm planning on doing an entire stream about discussing various platforms. Because there's a lot to be said about all of them.
For sure. I wish we had more mindshare for people like selling stuff themselves rather than having this expectation that everybody needs to align themselves with some monolithic platform that's not focused on your audience specifically or your work specifically.
Let me just quickly frame it as saying I like how GOG does it. They have a launcher. You do not have to use it. The launcher exists, but you can just buy games and play them. Yeah. In terms of the platform, yeah.
In terms of the client being optional, and you don't even need an account to buy stuff on itch, whereas I think you need an account to buy stuff on GOG.
I think so. Well, I know you need an email address, but that kind of amounts to the same thing. Huh. I wonder who that's for. Conveyance.
Yep. You show people a stop sign in a game or a keep out sign, they'll be like, oh, there's something interesting over here. This is where I'm
That's
gonna
where
go.
the secret's got to be.
Yep.
New Vegas is just a phenomenal game all around, though.
Yeah, I haven't played any of the Bethesda Fallout games.
New Vegas is Obsidian.
Oh, yeah, sorry. That era of Fallout games I haven't
That's fair.
had much exposure to. But yeah, I did recall that it was made by another developer who did a better job in general.
Well, Obsidian has a lot of people who worked at Black Isle, so it was sort of like the original dev team returning to Fallout in a meaningful way.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
And they remembered all the things that Bethesda forgot, like the fact that Fallout is at its core a comedy. It's a black comedy where the punchline is everyone's terrible, but it is a comedy. But yeah, onwards. How did you write this code so beautifully? I stole it. Stack Exchange.
Yeah, I don't copy and paste a lot of code, and when I do, I make sure to reference where it came from so that I can either cite stuff or attribute stuff, or even if I need to understand more about what it does, I can go and find it. But in general, I just kind of like to work things out myself.
I think it's better that way, but at the same time,
sometimes there's something that, like, okay, somebody else has something that works, I'm just going to use it and move on. But as long as you document it, as long as you cite it, even frankly, and like so you can return to it. Sometimes you don't need to know how your multiplayer photon architecture actually works, as long as it does work.
It's like if you're using a game engine, there is an incredibly large amount of code that someone else wrote that you're probably not looking at, that you're making use of. There's no real difference between that, except that maybe if you're copying and pasting other people's code off the internet, maybe it has a license that you need to be conscious about and respect, whereas when you get a game engine, that comes with one single license that you already know about ahead of time.
And you're expected to maintain this, whereas you're not expected to maintain the game engine.
Well, generally, yeah.
Whoosh.
It's more common to get source access to game engines now, which kind of leads to people maintaining their own versions.
Well, you can tell me about this one.
I actually found writing my own engine to be enormously empowering and positive.
Yep. Awesome.
So when I worked on Half-Life mods and brushed against the amount of work involved in creating, games of scale, I had this attitude that if I spent all of my time making tech, I would never have time to make games. And there was a game jam that I was thinking of participating in, and on a whim, I said, well, you know what? This is a small scope thing. It's only going to go for a week. I might use this time to just experiment with OpenGL and see what it takes to do. And I'd done something where I drew a triangle on screen, and I was like, okay, well, I can draw a thing. I'll give it a try.
Nice.
And yeah, I was like, well, actually, that's a lot less effort than I thought it would be. And I feel like going through the process of creating my own engine, creating my own authoring tools, and creating my own stuff has given me a better relationship with the, general purpose built by other people engines that I use. I feel like that was very, very rewarding.
Nice. Cool.
Yeah. I have a tiny, tiny maths brain, so I guess I can share an anecdote. And this is reflective of how I work, I suppose. So this is that text adventure engine where it has a 3D world that you can't see, and I work out what you're looking at and give you a text description of it, right? And because I needed to know whether or not the gameplay worked and whether or not it was interesting to experience, I kind of had to implement it, and I wanted to do that before I spent a lot of time working on things that I knew would take a lot of time. And so instead of writing raycasting code, I just colored every object uniquely and said, what is the color of the middle pixel? And that was enough to get me was the color of the middlemost pixel in the viewport.
Nice.
And that was enough to get things up and running, right? Like the approach that I have to development is I will take the path of least resistance to get scaffolding up that allows me to move forward with other things. And in that way sort of like build the structures that allow me to progress forward in the most efficient manner. And it was a long time before I came back to actually write some proper raycasting code. The reason that I wasn't happy to stick with that indefinitely is that means that I am I get that frame back from the graphics card, which means that I'm locked to whatever frame rate the stuff is rendering at, and I can only get it back a frame after, and that's not super efficient. So some raycasting code to do that with maths can still happen on the GPU if I wanted it to, but it doesn't lock everything into being frame dependent. And when it came time to write that, my tiny, tiny, tiny maths brain could not wrap my head around the mathematics that I needed to do, the formulas that I needed to execute in order to deal with rotating my objects once they were positioned correctly. And it was faster that I can understand the stuff, I understand the concepts involved in broad terms, but digging down into the minutiae of how to actually implement this, it'd be a case of I spent many weeks working on it and eventually came to the conclusion that it took more than a day's worth of time to catch up with what I needed to accomplish. And so every day would just be getting myself up to speed, and I would never actually get the work done. And so I was like, okay, well, how many possible combinations of sine and cosine and tan and whatever else are there? There's only 12. I'll just write them all and pick the one that works. And that
Nice.
was what I did in the end, and it only took a few hours. So
There you
like
go.
sometimes you just do that,
Okay.
and accept that maybe you don't have the big enough maths brain to work it out properly, and it's fine.
We're pretty pushing 2.5 hours, so let's go rapid
Oh
fire
yes,
for the
sorry.
for a bunch,
Let's
shall
go.
we? Let's see. LOD be like.
Oh, right, yes. Good times.
LOD being, if you're not looking at the object, it doesn't render as much because, well, it doesn't need to.
Well, it doesn't need to, yeah.
Save yourself the frames. Indie devs, tweets that only get seen by other indie devs. Is this
Yep,
marketing?
yep.
Yep, we covered that earlier. That's how marketing works. Clearly, it's fine.
It's a thing.
I found a game-breaking way to play the game and ignore whatever features and abilities you made. Now the game's boring because I have a boring way to play. Why are you playing that way?
Yeah. It's the game. Players aren't good at seeing outside their initial expectations and aren't necessarily good at navigating away from removing their own fun.
Yeah, I talked about this a lot when I was playing Chimera Squad, but that's something that's endemic to the XCOM formula, that mechanically the best way to play the game is to put everybody on Overwatch and take one step forward, repeat this every turn. And Chimera Squad breaks down the door by making you break down a door in every each encounter. And it works really well by fixing the core problem, and, well, it's different, so some people didn't like it because it's different, but it fixes the problem of allowing the player to play the game in a way that's not fun.
I really love Massive Chalice, which doesn't have Overwatch, and at the time that decision was made, I was questioning it, and the other developers who were working on it were talking about how they felt like there were enough other tactics games that didn't have it for it to be valid, and they felt like, in general, Overwatch is a crutch that leads people away from making interesting gameplay decisions. And I agree, for sure.
If you want as a taste of madness, Infinity is a tabletop game that has Overwatch rules. That gets messy.
Interesting. Yeah.
Not a bad game. It's just the rules can be messy because you have to manage so many tokens and whatnot.
Yeah.
Who would win? A computer program with 1,000,000 lines of code, or one curly boy with no friend?
Good times. Good times.
I love it. Unreal Engine when you try to open save files you saved to your hard drive. I haven't worked in Unreal Engine myself. I don't get it.
I'm guessing this is like it can't find a file.
Yeah, it's like
I'm pretty sure exists.
What are you looking for?
Because it doesn't have a cached version or something. Yeah.
Probably. But we can move on from that one though. Onward. Day 0. Day 100.
It can feel like that.
It can feel like that.
It can feel like that.
Why do it be like that though? I mean, not pictured here, of course, is the 60,000 lines of code that you have written down to, make that square spawn itself correctly in the right situations. But
and all of the other not squares that you made before you came to the conclusion that a square was what you needed, or a cube.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's another one of those things that's a lot easier to navigate with experience. You come to appreciate the actual amount of time and work that goes into a thing before it's fully realized.
Really small project. Really small project. Okay, listen, it's like GTA 5, but with 5.
Yeah. I mean, you run at these hurdles a few times, and then you understand that that's not how it works.
But like, there's so much that you want to do. There's just so many cool things.
There's an interesting thing where I don't know if this has any kind of like common name or label that people use to refer to it, but when you don't know how to do a thing, and you kind of don't know what's not possible. There are forms of inspiration and ideas that you can find accessible that are no longer accessible when you have some technique and know how to do things. And I feel like I see particularly artists or visual artists talk about this a lot, where they go, well, I don't know what to draw, and I feel like I don't have any good ideas anymore. Like, I spent so long honing these skills, but now I don't feel like I have any ideas to use them on. And I don't feel like that's a basic thing that has to happen. I think that's something that we allow ourselves to fall into, and that we need to, culturally, we kind of laugh at this. Like, we say that, the person who has no experience, who wants to make their own version of GTA that has some minor difference, but is still the same amount of work. I think that it's healthy to kind of embrace some of that childlike innocence, then build ourselves these mental frameworks that make us deny it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but I think that figuring out how to reduce your idea into something that's actually completable within your team's both budget and time frame can also help you boil down and melt away all the things that aren't unique and exciting to your project. That sort of if you try to make GTA 5 with fire breathing, you're going to be at it forever, and at the end you'll have like GTA 5 but different. If you start with it with the idea of, okay, what makes this idea unique and interesting and dynamic, and then say, okay, how do we do that? I'm always wary
of using unique as an anchor for that, because there are plenty of things where you can express something that is just a different nuance on what's already been done. I like to think of
innovative is a better word.
Well, I like to think of it as like, you boil it down to say what is the minimum that I can express the ideas that I want to express with, even if those ideas are derivative, even if they're not really doing anything interesting. I think you can still find yourself in a space that you can do interesting things with it once you boil it down to what is that essence. Yeah, minimum viable project for sure.
I often think about the SimCity designer explaining that they started to thinking they would replicate real American cities, but found they couldn't because the game would be nothing but parking lots.
I guess this is a modern SimCity, because that doesn't look like Will Wright's name. My favorite part about SimCity's development is that it started life as a level editor for a top-down helicopter shooter game.
Nice. We've been watching some various infrastructure videos and like actually looking at cities and based on parking lot size versus actual store size is kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I don't drive a car, so I'm not very into or invested in car culture, but we dedicate an incredible amount of space and infrastructure to motor vehicles, when making spaces for people will probably make a lot more sense and build more healthy and accessible spaces.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm in an area where you can't survive without a car. Like, it's just it's a non-option. The actual walkable space of the area is both too vast and too sparse to navigate meaningfully. Which is
interesting.
Which is interesting, but it's like, oh wait, like this. I don't know which SimCity designer this is, or which SimCity this is, but like, yeah. Are you making those measurements of different real-world cities? Do you find any surprising patterns? Yes, definitely. I think one of the biggest ones was parking lots. When I started measuring one at a local grocery store, which I didn't think of being that big, I was blown away by how much more space the parking lot was than the actual store. That was a problem, because we were originally just going to avoid model real cities, but we quickly realized that there were too many parking lots in the real world, and that our game was going to be very boring if it was proportional in terms of parking lots.
Just like, make that, you cowards. Make that statement. Put it in people's faces.
Show it. Yeah, no, right? Yeah, make that statement. Show it to people. Make them realize that, because the world. Okay, onwards. Infrastructure to stream next time. Coming back to my project 3 months later and seeing my code.
Yeah.
What was I working on?
This is why I like to look at my diffs, because it helps me get into that frame of mind a lot faster than just trying to read the finished code. I can see some of the steps to get there.
You need tutorials? Me trying to learn .NET and C#. Huh? I don't know if I get that one.
So I think what's happening here is someone is learning to use C# outside of Unity, and they're stumbling across Unity tutorials, and the Unity tutorials are like, just do this thing, but it turns out it's a Unity only API or something, and yeah.
That makes a lot of sense, yeah, because because Unity has so many resources that a C# programmer might need that might be Unity exclusive. I gotcha.
And that's because like Unity has lots of engine functionality that's just not going to be available to you unless you're bringing in Monogame or some other framework like that.
Which you might not want to do when you're programming an elevator or whatever.
Yeah.
I only made billions this year. Billions? I barely made millions. Millions? I count in thousands. You guys can buy food? This one kind of stings.
Yeah. So, I don't necessarily want to bring things down, but at the moment I am fasting every third day in order to cut my food costs down.
Mm-hmm.
So that I can live a little bit longer once I run out of money. Or push my run out of money point a few months out, you know? Like, yeah, it's tough. And you see people, they go, oh, you make games, you release games, therefore you must be successful and you must have lots of money. And that's not how it works. And it kind of sucks that the people who make 90% of the revenue in the industry are people who do not use those resources and the power that they have to provide positive workplaces for the people who do the actual work, and it makes me very angry.
Yeah, that's definitely a huge issue in general, and yeah,
it's tough.
Prepare for publishing. Publish to Steam. Steamworks, but actually publish though. I haven't published on Steam.
In the Steam partner backend, there's a little text box, and it says you have to type the word Steamworks into this text box before you can click the publish button.
Oh, it's just as a way to stop automation?
As a way to stop you from pressing the button accidentally, really.
Oh.
There are the command line tools you can use to automate this, automate a lot of things. But yeah, this is like making sure that you don't accidentally push your changes live before they're ready. So the prepare for publishing button gives you like a summary of what it gives you an opportunity to look at summaries of what your changes are, and then you've got a publish button that you press, and then you have to type in a thing and then actually have another button to press afterward. And it does feel a little bit silly, but when you think about it, like one day you're going to accidentally press the wrong button, you're going to be grumpy at yourself. So it's nice to have.
An indie hidden gem and a gamer going through new releases on Steam.
Yeah.
It can be really easy to get lost.
Yep, it sure is.
And this goes back to marketing, doesn't it? The curse that is needing to understand some level of marketing, and it's
also like that previous thing where we saw like different scales of stuff. Like I talk about not being able to pay myself minimum wage out of Hive time, that I've only sold like 882 odd full price equivalent copies, and there are other developers who I know who are like 800 copies, I don't even sell 5, and I don't feel like I want to whinge about my situation. I think as long as there are people below me, I want to try and use what I can to elevate others until everybody's at my point, and then I can whinge. But I want to focus on elevating people rather than bemoaning my position as much as possible.
Onwards.
Games where I'm the hero, this is brilliant. But I like this. Games where I'm just some random dude.
Yeah.
I like that. What was I think it was a reference to... Yeah, it was a reference to Dark Souls 2 in a video that was describing it, where they said, as opposed to you being the hero, the world is set up so that you are an interloper. You are just some random dude that people don't even, that no one really expects to succeed. You just showed up one day. And sometimes that can be a very powerful narrative that, like, instead of saying you are the chosen hero of the realm, be willing to say, you just blew in on a storm, and well, you aren't,
you aren't special, and you need to exist in a world that will still accept you.
I
Prove
really
yourself.
like and appreciate, and like, I don't want to make sure that I'm not inadvertently saying something that I don't intend to say here, but I really like and appreciate the way that Morrowind frames the world's attitudes towards the player character. That the people of Vardenfell are inherently racist, and you are deeply unwelcome there. And
Xenophobic, I think, would be a better phrase, because you
xenophobic,
still get
sure.
that even if you are Dunmer.
Dunmer, yeah, definitely. But like everybody is just kind of grossly racist anyway. Outside of that,
Also
as well.
true.
but also like there's this whole prophecy thing. But the game explicitly goes out of its way to tell you that maybe the prophecy isn't real, and maybe you're just being a pawn used by people who want to cynically manipulate the beliefs of the people of the land to fulfill that prophecy in their eyes, so that some stuff can happen. And yeah, I just really enjoy that you start out as a nobody and you build something up into a bigger thing. But even still, like, the biggest you can get is still not. You're still just a dude or a lady or a lady dude or whatever you want to be. It's fine. Yeah, you're still just kind of a person for the most part, and you can read it as you are a kind of prophesized mythical figure. But even if you are, you're still just kind of a person who has ties to things that are bigger.
Yeah, and that's a powerful narrative, because it's a powerful storytelling device.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there are lots of other examples of, like, maybe Sundew Valley, or even Don't Starve, where the focus is more about you building a life and carving out an existence, rather than being like a focal point for the world, or a giant hero, you know. It has started raining here, and I very briefly need to close a window. I'll be back in just a moment, but I'm ready to move onward.
And yes, there is going to be the Go-Go Game Jam coming up very soon, which I suppose I should probably. You know what? I'll take this. I'll take this as an opportunity now. Go-Go Game Jam exists. And it is going to be coming up in a month. Wait, what month is it? In late November. It will be there, and it will be awesome. And I will have Cheeseness back on for a game jam style discussion point.
I return.
Welcome back. We missed you.
Thank you. It's good to be back.
I went ahead and announced the game jam because
oh, cool!
That was not
congratulations on announcing a cool game jam that I'm sure people will make many cool games for.
It'll be amazing. Let's see. When your program's a complete mess, but it does the job.
Yep. that's my placeholder sounds, and other placeholder things that just, like, if it works, it works. Games are about the experience they convey, not necessarily about what goes on under the hood.
If it's dumb but it works, it ain't dumb.
Yep.
Onwards. Game developed after a short game jam. Don't burn yourself out.
I'm a big proponent of treating game jams as a project management challenge, and that if you are getting more hours by avoiding sleep, that's brute forcing the problem instead of solving it. Yeah.
Oh, and yes, I am one of the official judges on the game jam.
Nice.
Yeah. Let's see. Solving code problems. This will be easy. Oh no, I'm a fraud. Maybe I should fly to Mexico. Maybe if... Never doubt, I am a living legend.
Yeah, it's a bumpy ride. It's definitely a roller coaster we're on.
But, like, the final accomplishment just feels triumphant there, right? Like, when you actually do get it together.
Definitely.
We've only got a handful left. But what do we have here? When you're starting in there's no budget for background music. Well, add some royalty-free background music. Can't purchase the full version. Use the demo, and the demo has the the audio watermark in it.
It's like there are plenty of Creative Commons licensed royalty-free tracks out there. You don't need to use the stuff with audio stamps in it.
Yeah.
But it does mean that every now and again on the radio or TV or whatever else, you'll hear an ad or see an ad that has the music from your game in it.
Yeah, I got my I actually used the Unity Asset Store for the public digital rights for like my background and my music. Music has been playing this whole time.
I think someone mentioned earlier that the music might have stopped.
Yeah, it cut out because when my USB exploded, but it's back up now. But yeah, we're in the home stretch.
Woo, onward.
When game developers have free time, developing games or playing games.
This is interesting. I find that when I'm making stuff, I tend to do the stuff less. So when I'm writing, I read less. When I'm making games, I play games less. When I'm making music, I listen to less music.
Because you're already fulfilled on that creative outlet through your actions rather than through listening to, or through
I think
participating in.
I think it's partly that. I think it's also I just enjoy being immersed in whatever it is that I'm working on and don't want to fall out of that as well.
That makes sense. Although sometimes, if you hit a brick wall, sometimes that can be good to find your inspirations.
Yeah, definitely. It can be very good to have a palate cleanser along the way. Like I do still play some games while I'm doing stuff, but yeah, I find just organically that I end up being motivated to do that stuff less. But I do know that it's a struggle for a lot of people.
Yeah. Becoming a shader god. My brain hurt.
Good times.
Shaders
magic. I've written a bunch, and I still shaders magic.
Yeah, no, shader is arcane mysticism that I do not understand but respect.
And it's funny because I'm a programmer, and it's just code that runs on the graphics card. But I think it's like the node-based visual procedural stuff, where it's like it's asking you to think about doing visual art differently.
Yeah, and
that takes a bit of getting used to.
When you went through a play session without triggering any warning and alert, that doesn't happen. This is a photoshopped picture. No.
I actually try to keep my projects error and warning free. There is a really annoying Godot thing where there's a function that's been deprecated or marked for deprecation, and it shows up as a warning, but the thing that it's been replaced with isn't in yet, and I'm kind of like, well, that's
unfair.
That's not very fair.
I mean, for me, it's
I have one.
For me, it's a Unity Cinemachine. Unity Cinemachine throws like 1,000 warnings, and it's like, that's fair. That's never getting fixed.
And that's like one thing that kind of sucks about using other people's stuff is that they are going to have different thresholds for what's acceptable.
Yeah,
on that
exactly.
front, and different priorities in general. And it's a tricky thing, but you balance it up and you weigh up what your benefits are, and it's fine.
Professor explaining the subject, me trying to study on my own, an Indian guy on YouTube explaining the subject. Yeah, no, I've definitely found code hints that have followed this formula. It's like, okay, this is easy. I can work with this. He's explaining it in a way that makes me understand it.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it's like, and while I don't really like the idea of commercialization applying these kinds of pressures, that guy on YouTube probably needs to be able to deliver things effectively and simply in order to eat, you know.
Oh yeah, no, that's fair point. The tenured professor Yeah, the tenured professor.
I mean, that's what they're being paid for, and they obviously have a lot of skill and perspective and knowledge, but they're not under the same level of existential threat.
You're right. You're just right. Yeah,
but I think the middle one is the thing to as much as you can, if you can find ways to make teaching yourself accessible, that will benefit you in the long run, I think.
Or use the third to facilitate your own. Like instead of copying what someone else is doing on YouTube, say, okay, I'm going to watch a bit of this, and I'm going to pause and figure out how to apply this on my own. Now that I've gotten a hint.
And in the other direction as well, I think if you are practiced at being self-taught, you're often going to be in a better position to take stuff or find things of value to take away from more complex explanations of things. Onward.
Look, I've been around the world, okay? Whatever this is, I'll understand. I know nothing about this.
Stanley.
That was a good show. I just recently watched that show. It was very good.
It's very, very well made.
Let's see. Try to understand how your code works. Realize how your code works. And then delete everything and start from scratch.
That top picture was the inspiration for Hive Time's research symbols with all the triangles coming off the
workshops. Really?
Yep.
Nice. What is that show even? What is that from?
I have no idea.
I have no idea either.
But yeah, it's like this is another one of those things of where like you, by starting again or changing your tech or doing whatever, like you're exchanging a set of known problems for a set of unknown problems. And while sometimes it does make sense to just throw your entire hand out and get dealt a new set of cards, it's not a way that helps you grow, I don't think.
No. Not always. Though, I don't know, maybe learning when to do that could be valuable, but in general, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Sometimes there are exceptions where it's the right thing to do, but I feel like it's not a good habit to get into.
I agree with that, yeah. Onwards. When you're doing a UI work in a game, but the artist hasn't finished all the assets. And this is where I'd put the logo, if I had one.
Good times. I had a like very placeholdery logo screen on Bad Egg for up until I think like 3-4 weeks ago, I guess. And it was this like low poly version of the Godot logo and a low poly version of the Two Lost Bees logo. And over time, I kind of got very attached to it. And when it came time to replace it, I found that I missed it a lot.
Yeah, that's completely fair. And then some. Are you ever tempted to actually keep it in there somewhere?
Stuff. No, I think I shared enough screenshots and pushed enough like pre-release builds out that I feel like I expressed things that I could have expressed with it. But something I was going to say about placeholder stuff is like you mentioned earlier that it's easy for placeholder things to fall into release builds. It's so true. So like whenever you're doing this, find a placeholder that you would be at peace with if you forgot about it and accidentally shipped it in a build.
And that you're not going to be in trouble with.
Yeah. I did a Game Jam game once, and we had a joke in there that was like, it was about an old person suffering dementia, and trying to explore the idea that even though they were sort of socially ostracized and felt alone, that they had lived a full life and there were people who cared about them. But we just called the retirement home that they were in, we called it Shady Acres, and it was just a funny thing that we did to make ourselves laugh as a placeholder, and then we forgot to change it, and it's totally not appropriate.
Oops.
And there's also a joke in like some other thing, I don't know where it's from, but yeah. Good times.
Think, Mark, think! Where would you put the armor?
Oh yeah.
Are you familiar with this?
Yeah. It's a lovely change, like paradigm shift, right? Like it's like a real change in how people think about problem solving.
Okay, so just for people who might not be familiar with this, this is World War II returning flight bullet holes on returning planes. They were trying to figure out where they needed more armor, so they were looking at what areas were getting shot the most. And the obvious answer they got was, okay, this red area here, that's where we need more armor. But the thing that far too many people, frankly, missed out on is, no, these are the ones that made it home. Yeah, survivor bias, right. Exactly. So the armor needs to be on the places that don't have any visible bullet holes. Otherwise, because those are the planes that didn't make it home, that were the ones that
I have some vague recollection that prior to that, there was also a lot of research and development effort that went into like dredging up crashed planes out of lakes and stuff, and trying to analyze what the damage on the crashed planes was, and that the idea of looking at the planes that came back was something new, a new idea at that point as well.
Time is a flat circle.
Good times.
Onwards. Using tab for indentation, using spaces for indentation. The guy using semicolons for indentation, that guy's working on an entirely different level. I'm just impressed. It would work. Well, it's cursed.
The thing that I love most about this is you will notice that none of those lines ends in a semicolon.
It doesn't need to.
Right?
Why bother?
Dear. And you wonder whether, like, presumably they just set up their editor to insert semicolons instead of tabs, right?
Yeah. Never miss a semicolon again in your life. Life hack, coding hack. There you go.
Oh my goodness.
It's equal parts ridiculous and brilliant. I kind of love it. You know what? I'm coming around. I'm coming around on this. I think I actually love this.
I love the idea of never seeing this in a project I'm working on.
Onwards. Sometimes I leave a dangling else as a threat to the compiler that it better run that statement or else.
Good times. I like to think of the semicolon as please, and so after I've done a lot of work in Godot, I feel like Python in general, Python's primary purpose in existence is to make me bad at the languages that I actually enjoy using. And so when I come back to work in, C or whatever, I find that I'm accidentally missing braces or semicolons or parentheses around conditionals. And I write code and it doesn't run, and the compiler's like, what do you say? And I'm like, okay, please, and put the semicolon in, and then it runs.
Nice. Early access games be like?
Yeah.
It can be like that. Not all of them are. There are some games like that. And then there's some on the flip side where they're going to be eternally in early access for their entire, that have been existing in early access for years.
I feel like we have a lot of very rigid narratives about what game releasing and game monetization should look like that does not reflect the possibility space of what's valid.
And we also have a lot of flexibility on what early access is defined as.
Well, you remember when Valve initially launched early access, Steam Early Access, they were telling developers that it was a way to fund the development of games. And then after Space-Based launched, and a lot of internet angry mans got upset about it, they released a thing saying that anybody who wanted to do early access had to be in a position to fund the rest of development regardless of sales.
Yep, and that's when early access became Kickstarter.
That closed the possibility space and defeated the purpose, right? Yeah. It is tricky. I understand that you don't want people with the wrong expectations coming in, but I think the right way to solve that is to put better gates on to make sure that people who with the wrong expectations don't buy into something like early access than it is to just kind of change its identity entirely into something more conventional.
It's difficult to demand a certain level of communication, because that's really what it boils down to is the communication between what early access means for you and your company and your project, right? And it's
Yeah, I
difficult
mean,
to say.
we built a lot of culture around how to sell games, where it's like you deserve money from people who won't enjoy your games. That's why there's all these anti-demo narratives around, because ultimately if a demo turns out to turn someone away from your game, then that's a sale that you've lost. And it's like, well, no, you didn't really deserve that to begin with. If you were open with people about the kind of experience they could expect, then maybe you shouldn't have had that. And this is the other thing of like, people will be sated and want more, but I think that's kind of garbage along a different axis that's not really relevant.
Hey, remember when you could get a disc of demos from like magazines?
Yeah. But yeah, it is a shame that Steam Early Access kind of got neutered in that way, I suppose. And like maybe there is, I don't like the idea, but maybe there is value in just like having a named development model where it's like a subscription-based thing, sort of, where people pay for the game to be developed alongside them playing. And like, I know people have a lot of really enjoyable experiences of early access for that. I think that's a thing that some people want to pay for.
I've seen some games developed that way using Patreon.
Yeah, and some people are having like really good success with it.
Onwards. When you do marketing without a call to action, attention. Thanks for your attention. I'm being called out on this one. This one's just a direct call out on me. Okay, we're gonna move on. Initial development plan, actual development. Oh no. Uh-oh. Whoops. I think we're down to the last 10 actually now.
It's another thing that comes better with experience. You know, once you've done enough, you kind of learn what the pitfalls look like. And much like cooking, you've got to burn a few biscuits to get there.
Exactly. Onwards. When your luck show a different error than the one you've been seeing for the past 3 hours. Yay. It's like, it's an error, but it's not the same error. That means maybe I fixed the other one. Hooray.
In progress.
I feel that acutely. Unity. GameDev on YouTube. Godot. Mono game. Yeah, there's just a lot more support for some engines than others. There's a lot more support available.
Yeah, and I think it's important to differentiate between like vendor support and just community and existing community culture around a thing. But there are people who make stuff with Monogame or FNA, who have, you know, it's a smaller community, but there are people doing stuff and people who are willing to support each other.
They do good work.
Yeah. But yeah, you don't see like general audience YouTube content focusing on that.
Yeah, although you're starting to see some more with Godot, but it's not on the level of...
Godot will always be behind. Like, Unity launched in, like, I don't know, 2005, 2007, something? Like, there's nearly 2 decades of progress to catch up on that front, and I think that Unity will... Unless the company continues to make really bad decisions that alienate its users, I think the engine will always have like a culture that's been around longer, because that's how time works.
Yeah, exactly, and yeah.
That's fine. Yeah, it's fine.
Onwards.
I don't think it's a reflection on Godot.
When your code is broken, but it still works anyways.
Good times.
I made this
makes
one
you wonder, right? This makes you wonder, did someone actually like punch a hole so that their water would fall through there? Did they angle this pipe so stuff would go through the hole? Is it just an accident that it turned out the way it turned out?
I think that my guess is that it's an accident that only works with a certain flow of water, and then they made sure they put the right flow of water and took the shot at the right time.
Right.
But it's still, you know, it's still a good message though. I love it. You can tell it's mine because of the Helvetica rounded with the
the drop glow.
Mm-hmm. When the solution to your problem is restart Unity, this little maneuver is going to cost us 51 years.
I really enjoy working with tools that don't have a long opening time. It makes me very happy.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. The worst part is when your problem is restart Unity after troubleshooting it for 72 hours. That happened to me a couple times. It's like, oh, you mean this isn't a problem with my code and there isn't actually a problem at all?
This thing I've been chasing for half an hour is a ghost? Or this thing I've been chasing for 8 weeks is a ghost?
Yeah, I was going to say half an hour. No, I was being serious about 72 hours. I have regrets.
Part of my sleeping every night is turning my computer off every night.
Yeah, that's a good idea if it's in the same room as you. Mm-hmm.
Well, I sleep in a different room from my computer, but it also it forces me to do end of day stuff. It forces me to save all of my things when I close everything
that's clever.
down, and when I get up in the morning, I have to open everything deliberately, and that just gives me a different kind of rhythm to what I used to have.
Sort of make a ritual out of it. Makes sense. Code editor with everything, or an old editor that he just exports codes to a file.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of IDEs, really. I feel like they optimize away the time that I use to do better work. So like I was talking before about not working faster than you can think. Like if I've got code that I'm writing out, if I'm taking the time to type something out instead of having autocomplete do it, then that's a little bit of extra time for me to think about what's going on and
what
I
you're
feel
using
like I
it
do
for.
better work. Yeah.
That's interesting. I mean, I've done coding and using Notepad plenty of times.
Yeah.
So I hear you.
I know a lot of people who rely on and need like strongly featured or very broadly featured IDEs to do their work, and that's fine. It's valid. But yeah, I generally prefer a lighter approach.
It should be. I think it would make sense to have both available to you. If you want to code in a simple thing, fine. But sometimes being able to throw it into code editor that actually can let you check your cross references, with just having an algorithm do it, might help you.
I don't hate syntax highlighting. I don't mind Godot's thing where I can hold down Control and click on a function name and it'll take me to that function.
Yeah, exactly.
That stuff's kind of a nice convenience. But yeah, I do like to not rely too heavily on IDE features.
Onwards. Hacker voice. I'm in. Video game puzzles. I love this
the
as well.
Keys,
the worn-off keys. That's fantastic. There's, yeah.
Good times.
Puzzle design is hard though. Puzzle design is really hard.
It is.
Developer accused of unreadable code refuses to. Oh.
I see.
I get it. I see what's going on now. Okay. Oh, that. Okay. We're just gonna. Okay. When you code a test to prove a point, but you end up disproving your point, but that's okay because you learned something new.
Yeah, that's a healthy attitude. I love it.
Yep, that's valuable. There's value in that.
Yep. We're all explorers. We're magicians and explorers.
Absolutely. Small scope game that you can finish with your skill set in reasonable time, or that overscoped game idea that you will never finish.
I feel like I'm the opposite. I feel like I'm maybe that's just me, a phase that I'm in at the moment. But I feel like I can do the small scope stuff now. That's
good.
Represents about 3 months' work. The Bone Sweeper prototype that I did is about a month's work, and those fell in pretty close to what I had imagined. I've shipped Hive Time. I've done a bunch of other games, but I still carry around the hope that I'll get to work on these larger scope games and get to finish them at some point.
And yeah, you actually have your stuff as a bucket list, which is a very respectable way of going about it.
I feel like it's better than having them eat away at me constantly by feeling like I am actually working on them.
Onwards.
Onward.
Theory is when you know everything, but nothing works. Practice is when you don't know anything, yet everything works. GameDev, you combine Them too. Nothing works and we don't know why. I don't like that mindset, but at the same time, it's funny, so I tip my hat and say, okay, funny joke, funny.
I feel like when we're actually making stuff that it's more exploratory than that, and we discover things along the way.
Yeah,
I much prefer
exactly.
the other one with the thumbs up.
Slaps Unreal 5. This bad boy can fit so many triangles in it.
Oh my goodness. You know, when that video trailer, engines have trailers now. When that video came out,
engines have trailers these days.
I finished watching it and I paused for a moment and I said out loud, "Imagine being that obsessed with triangles." I was like, none of this has any value to me.
It's a lot of triangles, though. You got to admit. I'm more impressed by how many. I'm more impressed by how many triangles the video card can push than I am with how many triangles the engine can handle. Because at the end of the day, the hardware is going to be the limiter for more of a limiter for the long term for the players.
And so, like, if the engine is doing a lot of extra processing under the hood to let you give the engine a lot of triangles that it then finds ways to turn into fewer triangles before the graphics card actually renders it, then, like, maybe better workflows are in order? Like, is that the right solution? It doesn't sound very efficient.
Better workflows? Wait, who makes Unreal? Oh, wait, never mind. Let's move on. Upgrading to the Universal Rendering Pipeline in Unity. No point light shadows, no real-time GI, no light cookies, no deferred rendering at all in experimental 2D, but shader graph.
Oh, you're the shader graph enthusiast.
Yeah, I like shader graph.
Yep. You can relate to this one?
No, you lose so much. It wouldn't be worth it, but shader graph lets me do things that I wouldn't do. Not that I couldn't do, but it lets me do things that I wouldn't do otherwise. So for me, the trade-off is worth it. And it's hard to describe.
You would like prototype stuff in shader graph and then kind of go to some other shader wizard and go, "Hey, look, this is the kind of thing I'm after. Can we like do this in another method?"
Cool. Like if I were cooler, yes.
I wonder whether that's a thing that people do, is like use these visual things to quickly prototype up stuff and white box stuff to come up with looks and feels that they're interested in.
Makes sense. You are the most up-to-date stable branch, but we do not grant you the rank of master. What? How can you do this? This is outrageous. It's unfair. How can I be pushed into production and not be master? Just merge the conflicts. Take a seat, young integration dev revision 3 working commit.
Oh dear.
Learn Git.
Yeah, good branch management is important. If you again, you don't have to engage with that stuff, but if you are going to engage with it, be thoughtful about how you're managing it, because otherwise you will wind up in situations where you would wish that you hadn't named this branch Box01, or you would wish that you had not called this thing Final, or whatever. Like, just as with everything, try and be conscious about your work and your workflows.
And we have the final meme.
Here we go.
Stop programming computers. Sand was never meant to think. This is very cruel to rocks.
Yeah, this is dead rocks we're talking about.
At the Sorry.
I'm enjoying the font choice. I'm not enjoying the font choices, but I am enjoying not enjoying the font choices here.
Yes. It's a bold take to take 4 different font choices in one meme. You know what? I respect it.
It almost feels intentional, right?
It has to be. It's like everything is exactly not justified enough. It's It's
yeah, because you're like, at first glance you could be like, oh, the bottom 2 are right aligned, but no, they're not.
No, they're nope. It takes a level of artistry to make something that isn't coherent, like in the right way, you know.
Yeah, I do appreciate this one.
Ah,
We did it!
we did it! And
Yay, hooray!
excellent talks. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. It really is. Thank you so much for making
Cheers.
time for us.
It's been fun. I hope it's been enjoyable.
It absolutely has. And you have so you just put out the bat. What is it called again? Egg.
Bat egg.
Bat egg. Bat egg. I was thinking egg bat. Yeah, bat egg.
I found that bad egg is like hard to enunciate clearly.
Mhm.
So for people who haven't heard it, when I go, "Oh, have you seen bad egg?" They're like, "What?"
Mhm.
And then that's on top of the whole. Once they understand what the words were, they're like,
Mhm.
"Wait, bad
Okay.
egg?
But what?
What? But when you see it, you're like, "Oh yeah, that's a bad egg. I get it."
Mhm. Oh, it makes perfect sense. Actually, I can. Can I put that on the screen? Maybe not effectively at the moment. Ah. So yeah, that just came out. Hive Time is,
Yeah.
of course, is still available and a fantastic game. We've covered that on the channel before.
We mentioned the Bone Sweeper prototype, which is also
Mhm.
available on my itch page, down under the smaller games section.
Mhm.
As is a game that I made for the Stop Waiting for Godot Jam last month, called, well,
Mhm.
possibly still this month for you, but last month for me,
Mhm.
called Cloud Courier, where the idea is that you have a hot air balloon and you raise and lower it to enter and exit airstreams that move you between villages that are floating in the sky, and you like deliver packages to people and stuff.
Nice.
It's very nice.
Excellent. All these links are in the description. You should definitely follow them and check them out. And I hope to have you on again during when the Go Godot game jam comes up to just for some game design discussion. Probably won't do another full meme review like this. So this was a blast.
Yeah. No, I'd be happy to chat about jams and jam stuff and people's jam work and jam.
Jam. Okay, we've officially gotten silly.
Whoops.
Well, I think I'm going to retire into the Discord channel, and if anybody wants to, go over there and chat. Thank you so much again for joining. Is there anything else you wanted to?
Thanks for having me. No, I'm pretty good, I think. Yeah, make cool stuff. Be cool. Be nice to the world and the people around you.
Make
in
wonderful
these difficult
things.
Times. Yeah.
Make wonderful memes about the wonderful things that you make.
Everybody have a lovely day.
Have a wonderful day. Cheers, friends.